Good evening. And tonight, in New Court, St. Swithin's Lane, in the city of London, in November 1875, with quill pens scratching ledger paper through coal smoke and beeswax candle scent, in the hushed reverence of the most powerful private bank in the world, you sit where 100 flat lockless miles of water through Egyptian sand already decide how fast tea, mail, and empire move. Welcome back to Owen in Brunswick, Melbourne, and to Olivia in Bath, who both commented on the last video and stayed until the end, and I am glad you are here again. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, just like Owen and Olivia did. And if you want an easy place to rest each night, please like and subscribe so you can fall asleep gently every episode. Have you ever noticed how one new shortcut can quietly change the shape of a whole life before you are fully used to it? You turn back to the desk. The nap of your black wool sleeve brushes the desk edge, while warm beeswax, cold coal smoke, and the dry whisper of nibs on thick paper fill the close evening air. Mr. Pemberton is already blotting a column and straightening his inkwells in offended little taps as you open the first ledger of the shift and settle in for what should be a very ordinary night. You sit at the clerk's table with your stool set just so. Your knees fit under the worn wood as neatly as they do every evening. The surface shines where years of cuffs and elbows have polished it smooth. You lay out the first tools without hurry. There's the penknife for the nib, there's the sand shaker, the blotter, the ruler, and the little dish that pretends to keep order and mostly holds clicks. The ledger itself has a heavy patience to it. When you open it, the spine gives a soft crackle, like a fire settling down. The paper is thick enough to feel almost cloth-like under your fingers. You always like this first moment of the shift. The columns wait in clean lines. The candlelight lies across them in warm bands. Numbers still behave themselves before people begin asking them to perform tricks. Across from you, Mr. Pemberton clears his throat with professional sorrow. He has served New Court for 30 years, and he regards every sum above £50,000 as a personal insult to neat shelving. He treats disorder in a ledger the way a gardener treats slugs. His cuffs already carry the day's map of ink. One thumb bears a navy smudge. 2 fingers wear a lighter gray stain, where he has corrected someone younger and less exact. He straightens the nearest inkwell by a fraction that only he can see. When he grows agitated, small objects grow tidy around him. Pens line up, sand shakers face one direction, receipt trays sit square to the edge of the desk, as if they have suddenly joined the army of paper. Tonight he is not agitated yet, though he is preparing, just in case. Around you, New Court keeps its evening manners. Doors open softly. Footsteps remain respectful. Even a cough seems to apologize before it enters the room. The bank has the sort of hush that money acquires when it becomes old enough to feel permanent. That hush is not empty. It is packed with tiny sounds. Quills scratch, pages turn. A coal settles in the grate with a low click. Somewhere a drawer closes, then closes again more carefully, because the first closing was not satisfactory. You work in the most powerful private bank in the world, and it feels less like thunder than housekeeping. Great things arrive here by note, by message, by sealed packet, and by the simple act of a man taking off his gloves. Then they become paper, which is a very calming fate for almost anything. The walls keep the days cold better than the candles can chase it away. You feel it at your ankles first. Then, you feel the slow answer of the fire on your hands when you hold them near the lamp. London in November always knows how to slip into a room. Outside, the city is already dark. St. Swithin's Lane holds the sound of wheels and hoofbeats in a narrow channel of stone. When a carriage passes, the windows answer with a mild rattle, then settle back into their own thoughts. In the adjoining drawing room, Lady Charlotte occupies an armchair with excellent posture and even better opinions. You cannot see her from your seat, but you know when she lifts her teacup. The saucer receives it again with a measured click that always means judgment has been passed somewhere. She has been commenting on the weather for 10 minutes, which is never only about the weather. Before long, the weather becomes hospitality, then household standards, then the broad moral condition of people who keep poor coal. It is one of her gentler hobbies. For the moment, nothing unusual presses upon the house. You expect routine work. You expect correspondence, balance checks, and perhaps a last packet from the foreign desk. You expect, if fortune is kind, a cold supper brought in at 9:30. That supper will likely involve pigeon pie that has given up any claim to heat. There may be mustard if the kitchen remembers. There may also be a heel of bread, a pickled onion, and one apple that is trying bravely to remain respectable. You would not call it fine dining, but it knows its task. You dip your pan and begin the first line. The motion is familiar enough to feel almost restful. Date first, reference next, then the figures, each in its proper place, with enough space between them, that no future clerk can accuse you of enthusiasm. Yet even in this ordinary hour, one subject hangs over the room like a map pinned behind the eyes. It is not London, it is not Paris, it is a strip of water far away, cut through desert and made to behave like a road. A Suez Canal has been open only 6 years. That is hardly any time at all in banking, where ledgers remember what grandfathers forgot. Yet 6 years is plenty of time for a useful thing to become necessary. In 1869, when the canal opens with music, flags, dignitaries, and a great deal of polished optimism, some people treat it as a marvel. Other people treat it as a gamble. A few treat it as a French performance with excellent costumes and uncertain bills. Now in 1875, fewer people bother with the argument. Ships use it, letters depend on it, goods move through it. Once that happens, opinions begin to tidy themselves in the direction of fact. Before the canal, a ship leaving Britain for India goes the long way around the Cape of Good Hope. The route is grand on a map and tiresome in practice. It asks for more time, more coal, more planning, and more patience than any merchant truly enjoys. The old route has its own weather and pride. It also has a habit of making delivery dates look like hopeful poetry. A promise made in London can spend so long at sea that it nearly changes its mind before Bombay sees it. Then the canal arrives and trims the world. Not by magic, not by any airy theory, by the simple act of removing a huge, inconvenient loop from the journey. Bankers love many things, but they are especially fond of a shorter route. From London to Bombay, the difference feels almost rude. Months collapse into weeks, not all the way and not every time, but enough to change habits. Once people taste a quicker journey, they become very poor at returning to a slower one. Tea reaches Britain sooner, mail reaches officials sooner, orders for cloth, machinery, and metal goods travel on a tighter rhythm. News moves with fewer long silences between question and answer. The empire begins to breathe in a new tempo. You do not need to leave your desk to feel that tempo. It arrives in the kinds of papers you handle. Bills mature against different expectations. Insurance notices shift their language. Merchants write as if distance has suddenly become less dramatic, which in business is nearly the same as distance becoming less real. If you want a modern comparison, though you do not know that phrase yet, the canal is the Victorian internet backbone. Whoever controls the cable controls the world. In 1875, absolutely everyone with a desk and a map understands the principle at once. The canal itself is oddly plain for something so important. It is not a chain of grand locks climbing a hillside. It is not a mountain pass with heroic curves. It is, in the most startling way, a long level cut through dry land. About 100 miles stretch from end to end. There are no locks because the waters on both sides sit close enough in level. A ship enters and simply goes on, which must feel to the captain like discovering a door where a wall used to be. On either side lies flat desert, sand, heat, light, then more sand. It is almost funny that so much of the world's trade now depends on scenery with so little interest in decoration. You picture it sometimes while the rain taps London windows. A dark ship moves between bright banks of earth. The wake rolls out and fades. Beyond the dredged edges there is nothing lush or shaded, only dry open ground and a sky with no ceiling to speak of. The canal can seem less like a river than like a thought drawn with a ruler, straight enough to look deliberate, narrow enough to feel improbable, important enough that nobody laughs for long when they first hear how simple it appears. That is often the way with inventions that matter. Once they exist, they become embarrassingly obvious. Of course, a canal through Egypt would save time. Of course, a shorter line beats a longer loop. Of course, everyone then behaves as if they knew it all along. Britain, meanwhile, grows steadily more dependent on this tidy slice of geography than it first likes to admit. There is a national habit of distrust toward other people's grand projects. there is also a stronger national habit of using whatever works. India sits at the center of that habit. So do the markets farther east. So do steamship schedules, mail contracts, imported goods, exported goods, and all the thousands of patient arrangements that make a global system look normal from a breakfast table. A breakfast table in London does not see the root. It sees tea in a cup. It sees sugar in a bowl. It sees printed news and assumes paper arrives because paper always has. But every ordinary thing rests on distance, and distance has recently been edited. That is why the canal matters so much. It does not merely help trade. It rearranges expectation. It teaches merchants, officials, and families to think in shorter intervals. After that lesson, any threat to the route feels less like inconvenience and more like someone moving the staircase overnight. Even Mr. Pemberton, who distrusts novelty on principle, now keeps shipping references that assume Suez timings. He mutters at them, but he keeps them. Resistance has its limits when invoice dates begin arriving earlier than your prejudices. You blot a line and glance toward the far shelves. There are ledgers for loans, ledgers for securities, ledgers for foreign business, and ledgers for matters too sensitive to advertise by label. Mr. Pemberton knows them all, and more troublingly, he knows where their cousins are kept. He also knows where the secret extra ledgers are. Every few months, when a transaction becomes too large, too tangled, or too embarrassing for ordinary binding, he produces another sub-ledger from a drawer nobody knew existed. New Court contains more hidden paper than some cathedrals contain prayer. Tonight, his drawers remain closed. That is comforting. A closed drawer suggests a calm evening. An open drawer suggests Europe has remembered your address. You return to the figure before you. The ink shines wetly for a moment, then dulls. Candlelight catches the ridge of the paper where the nib presses harder on a downstroke. These are small pleasures, but clerks are allowed small pleasures, and often little else before supper. The room smells richer as the candles warm. Beeswax gives off a soft sweetness that mixes with old paper, cloth bindings, sealing wax, and a trace of soot. It is not a fresh smell, but it is an honest one, like a coat worn many winters and brushed each morning. From the drawing room comes another deliberate click of porcelain. Lady Charlotte has evidently reached the subject of public men. You cannot hear every word, though you gather that somebody somewhere is being audacious, in a manner she finds both exhausting and, secretly, a little impressive. New Court sees plenty of audacity in polished boots. Men come through these rooms asking for time, credit, discretion, or all three. Some carry documents thick enough to prop a table leg. Some carry nothing but confidence, which is the cheaper luggage and often the heavier burden. The canal, though, is bigger than any one visitor. It begins as French vision and Egyptian labor and administration, then turns into a company with shares, directors, and the usual hopeful paperwork. The French hold a strong hand in its making from the start. Egypt holds the other great stake. The ruler of Egypt, the Khedive, possesses a large block of shares that gives his treasury a very solid-looking claim on this watery marvel. Solid-looking claims, as every clerk learns, are not always the same as solid circumstances. For now, you need only the broad shape. France and Egypt stand as the founding partners of the Canal Company. Britain, for all its vast shipping interest, does not begin by owning the main share it later wishes it had bought with more foresight and less muttering. This happens often in public life. First a thing is doubted, then it is used, then it is found to be indispensable, then everyone looks around for someone sensible to blame for not owning more of it earlier. You suspect the British genius lies partly in arriving late, and then acting as if lateness was the plan. It is a very tidy national talent. It saves embarrassment and produces excellent speeches. In the bank, however, speeches matter less than settlements. Here a canal becomes a company becomes shares. Shares become collateral, influence, opportunity, and 100 quiet calculations done by men whose sleeves shine at the elbow. You have seen the certificates. They are handsome in the way important paper often is. Fine printing, borders with confidence, signatures that lean across the page as though ownership itself prefers a flourish. The canal may be a ditch in the sand, but its documents dress for dinner. It is easy to forget how new all this still is. 6 years ago, people discussed whether the canal would truly matter. Now they discuss it the way people discuss weather, shipping, and taxes, which is to say is something impossible to ignore and tedious to live without. The speed of the change impresses you. Whole systems bend quickly when profit encourages them. A merchant who would resist a principle for 10 years will accept a faster route in 10 days. Human nature, for all its speeches, remains strongly attached to shorter bills. You think of the sea road in practical fragments. A steamer takes on coal. A clerk seals a packet. A wife writes a letter. A tea chest leaves a dock. A customs man yawns. All these little acts link themselves to that cut in Egypt, as neatly as thread through a needle. Without Suez, the road stretches and slackens. With Suez, the thread pulls tight. Schedules become firmer. Promises become riskier, because now people expect them kept. Speed is wonderful until it becomes normal, and then it becomes the standard by which delay is judged. That, more than anything, explains the mood that clings to the canal. It is not romance, it is habit. Once a nation builds its habits around a route, the route begins to feel like part of the furniture, even when the furniture stands in another continent. You pause to warm your fingers around the base of the lamp. The metal is not hot, only gently warm. Outside, the night deepens. Inside, the clerks bend over their pages like gardeners over rows, each tending his own straight lines. Mr. Pemberton finally opens one drawer. You look up with mild alarm, but he only removes a smaller ruler and a fresh packet of blotting paper. Still, he opens the drawer with the gravity of a man unveiling legal evidence against chaos. He notices your glance and sniffs. Then he squares the blotting paper to the desk edge. This appears to restore his faith in civilization for at least 3 minutes. A messenger passes through the corridor with soft shoes and a folded note. No one hurries. New Court does not care for visible hurry, if calm will do. Even urgent business prefers to arrive wearing composure, the way some guests wear decent gloves over questioned manners. You think again of the canal's bare physical fact. No locks. That detail always pleases you. It feels almost impolite, as if engineering has removed the usual ceremonial pauses and told ships to keep moving. A canal with locks makes a performance of passage. Gates open, water rises, water falls. Everyone stands about waiting for the machinery to have its feelings. Suez offers no such theater. It is a through line, a straight answer, and perhaps that is why bankers admire it so deeply. Flat desert on both sides means little shade and little distraction. A ship there must seem suspended between sea and land, belonging fully to neither. You imagine officers leaning over rails to look at sand, and deciding after a minute that they have seen enough sand for one watch. Still, they continue. They continue because the canal saves time, and time has become the rare luxury everyone insists on measuring in money. That is another plain truth of your profession. People speak warmly of principle, and then pay extra for promptness. In one corner of the room, a junior clerk makes a copying error and quietly curses himself. The sound is so soft it merely counts as prayer. You do not look up. In a bank this grand, embarrassment travels farther than sound. The first ledger of the evening grows heavier with entries. Your wrist begins its usual steady ache, not painful, only present. It is the sort of ache that tells you the night is becoming real. Work settles best when the body notices before the mind complains. You pause to sand the fresh line. Fine grains scatter over wet ink like pale dust over dark earth. You tip the page and let the extra fall away. The letters remain sharp, which is one of the few tidy rewards the universe gives without argument. From next door, Lady Charlotte says something about after-supper business being vulgar. You suspect she would prefer commerce to keep better hours, though commerce sadly tends to arrive whenever it smells importance and a lamp still burning. If anyone tries to explain why the Khedive of Egypt ever does anything costly, explanations drift around London like loose feathers. One week it is gambling debts. Another week it is a palace renovation that has somehow tripled in cost. By the time gossip reaches the servants' hall, there is often a fleet of private yachts and an alarming number of French clocks involved. Mr. Pemberton, for his part, refuses to enter golden staircases into any ledger until presented with proper documentation. This is one of his sounder policies. A bank survives by distrusting decorative rumors, though it keeps them nearby for amusement. You do not yet know which explanation people will prefer tomorrow. Tonight the Khedive is only a distant presence attached to shares, signatures, and speculation. Distant men become much easier to discuss once they have been converted into paper values. That is the comfort of New Court. The world arrives in forms that can be numbered. Deserts become routes. Routes become revenues. Governments become letters in decent envelopes. Even an empire, once it reaches a desk, must wait its turn behind the blotter. You shift in your seat and pull your cuffs back a little. The linen at your wrist feels cool against skin warmed by the lamp. Your coat sits close but not badly. Long practice has taught you which movements avoid a pinch at the shoulder while writing. A clerk's life is full of such tiny strategies. You learn how to hold a pen for endurance rather than beauty. You learn how to eat pie one-handed over a side plate without endangering contracts. You learn that a stool moved half an inch can improve a whole evening. The gaslights outside cast a dim stain through the window, but candles still rule the desk. Their light is kinder to paper, even if it flatters the shadows too much. Every page seems more serious by candlelight, which is helpful because most pages long to be taken seriously. You think of Bombay again, because the canal always leads your mind there, not to grand scenes, not to speeches, simply to arrival. A ship comes in sooner, a packet is opened sooner, a reply begins sooner. That is how the world changes most days, by a sooner that becomes ordinary. 6 years ago, sooner still felt astonishing. Now sooner is expected, and expected quickly becomes necessary. It is a sly little progression, and it explains much of modern life long before anyone calls it modern. The canal has done that to trade. It has compressed patience. It has taught merchants and ministers to live with tighter clocks. The old broad ocean pauses have not vanished, but they have been pinched inward, and everyone behaves a little differently because of it. So, you sit in London and feel Egypt under your hand without touching a grain of sand. That is the strange charm of finance. You can remain indoors and still spend an evening in the company of distant harbors, cotton bales, steam coal, teak crates, and tea chests. Mr. Pemberton gives a small, satisfied grunt at a balanced column. It is the nearest sound he makes to contentment. Then, as if embarrassed by happiness, he rearranges his pens once more and resumes looking burdened by the age. The bank continues its soft work around you. One clerk folds correspondence, another checks a figure by lamplight, and blinks at it as though the number itself might apologize. Somewhere deeper in the house a servant carries a tray, and the cups answer with a mild rattle. Nothing yet suggests that the evening will grow famous. That is often how famous evenings begin. They wear the face of routine, they smell of wax and coal. They ask only for clear figures and decent penmanship. You lower your head and write another entry. The canal remains for this calm moment, a line in a company book and a blue cut on a map. Outside, a carriage rolls along St. Swithin's Lane, and you do not look up. You hold the latest canal tables beside the green-shaded lamp, and the paper already feels warm from your fingers. The room smells of coal smoke, sealing wax, and the faint sweet note of beeswax candles. Outside, November presses at the windows like damp felt. You smooth the sheet flat with the side of your hand. The figures sit in neat columns, calm and tidy, which is almost rude of them. They describe a world in motion with the manners of a tea tray. Around you, New Court keeps its evening hush. Quill pens scratch across ledger paper in little dry bursts. A coal scuttle waits by the grate, and one boot scraper by the door still glistens from the rain. You run your eye down the entries again. Steamers from Bombay pass through. Mail packets pass through. Ships carrying cotton, tea, wool, jute, machinery, and all the patient clutter of empire pass through. Most of them fly the British flag. Not morely many of them. More than 70 in every 100 do. The number settles into you with a special kind of annoyance. It is not sharp annoyance. It is the long, woolly annoyance of a draft under a door that nobody repairs. You picture the traffic as you always do. Red ensigns flutter in hot canal wind. Decks creak under chests of tea, bundles of cloth, sacks of rice, spare iron parts, and trunks packed by men who never fold a shirt correctly. The canal itself is only a strip of water and mud, yet all the useful things in the world seem determined to squeeze through it at once. It is the Victorian internet backbone, if the internet smelled of tar, oranges, and engine oil. On another table, the shipping reports wait in a stack tied with blue ribbon. You untie them. The ribbon has gone glossy where too many thumbs have passed over it. Each report gives the same quiet answer. British merchants rely on the canal almost as if nature made it for them personally. British insurers price its risks. British shippers time their seasons by it. British newspapers treat each passage like the sun rising on schedule. Mr. Pemberton leans over your shoulder with a sigh that carries 30 years of office dust. His cuffs are gray with ink, as usual. He peers at the numbers as if they have insulted his aunt. Still above 70, he mutters, which is not really speech at all. It is a private complaint directed toward Providence. Then he straightens an inkwell that was not visibly crooked. You know this look on him. He has been worrying at this matter for years, the way a terrier worries at an old boot. Only Mr. Pemberton does it with subledgers, not teeth. He opens a drawer low in the side cabinet. Another ledger appears from some hidden depth of polished wood. Nobody in the house seems to know how many drawers exist, and Mr. Pemberton prefers that mystery. He lays the book open with reverence. The leather crackles softly. Pages bloom outward, filled with dates, ship counts, toll rates, and the sort of notes that suggest he has never once trusted a printed summary. You stand together under the lamplight. Rain taps the windows in a slow, polite way. From the front room comes the muffled click of china, followed by Lady Charlotte setting down her teacup with clear opinion. Mr. Pemberton taps a page with one blunt finger. His nail carries a moon of black ink. Every year worse, he says, and by worse he means more important. That is the strange part. The canal succeeds too well. More British traffic uses it each season, which only makes the next fact feel more absurd. You own not one share in the company that governs the whole waterway. Britain, with all its steamers and mail and urgent parcels of respectable socks, stands outside the shareholder list, like a man using the front path, but never possessing the key. You let the thought sit for a moment. It deserves the full chair. It is ridiculous in the dry, expensive way that only imperial business can be. There are British ships in the canal by the hundred. There are British merchants whose timetables cling to it like burrs. There are British ministries that fret over it with the intimate concern of a mother over a feverish child. Yet on the books of the Suez Canal Company, Britain possesses nothing at all. Not a cautious little foothold. Not a token seat cushion in the boardroom. Nothing. The room feels warmer after that thought. A coal in the grate shifts in size inward. Somewhere down the corridor, a messenger removes wet gloves and sniffs from the cold. You reach for a fresh sheet and copy figures into a cleaner hand. The nib catches once on the paper fibers. You sand the line lightly, and the grains hiss across the desk. Mr. Pemberton watches the copying with satisfaction. He dislikes disorder in any form, but imbalance troubles him most. He regards it as a moral failure on the part of arithmetic. He tells you again, though you know it already, that dependence without ownership is a bad habit. He says it the way another man might discuss damp boots or undercooked mutton. A thing need not be dramatic, to be unforgivable. From the next room, Lady Charlotte speaks without raising her voice. She has the gift of being heard through doors, upholstery, and generations. She asks whether the nation truly means to rout its future through a ditch, while letting Frenchmen mind the gate. Her teacup clicks again. The click lands exactly where a footman sets a plate down. Even the silver seems to pause and consider her point. You think of the canal offices far away, with Max pinned to walls and French names at the top of papers. You think of British captains paying tolls, with the calm misery of men feeding a machine that does not belong to them. The whole thing has the air of a household, using a neighbor's kitchen every day, while pretending not to notice. It works well enough until supper matters. Then every borrowed spoon begins to feel personal. A clerk brings in a tray with tea gone stewed and a plate of plain biscuits. One biscuit is cracked neatly in two. You take the less damaged half and continue adding up the discomfort. The discomfort has a number, which is always helpful. It sits in Egypt, in the hands of the Khet of Ismail. It amounts to 177,000 shares. Mr. Pemberton says the number as though it were a dental complaint. He does not rush it. Those shares make up roughly 44% of the whole company. Nearly half. In other words, nearly half of the canal company rests in one set of hands, and those hands are presently famous for expensive tastes. You know the Khedive first through papers, not portraits. He arrives as ledgers, telegrams, and comments written in bankers' polite acid. The papers smell faintly of damp leather in foreign offices. At first, the explanation is simple enough. There are debts. There are too many projects. There is a court that spends with the casual confidence of people who have never met an unpaid bill. Then the explanation grows, as explanations tend to do when it passes through 3 cities and 6 desks. A palace renovation appears. Its cost has somehow tripled. Mr. Pemberton writes "palace" in the margin, then underlines it once with disapproval. By the next retelling, there are also French clocks, not 1 or 2 tasteful mantel clocks. A wide and apparently multiplying collection of French clocks, each more decorative than useful, and all united in their refusal to improve cash flow. Lady Charlotte asks from the drawing room whether the clocks tell different times for different creditors. Nobody answers, because the answer might be yes. Later still, someone mentions private yachts, then a stable extension, then a garden plan involving fountains, marble, and enough imported shrubs to alarm a botanist. The tale becomes so padded with luxury that even the paper seems to sigh under it. At one point, an evening messenger repeats a rumor of a golden staircase. Mr. Pemberton shuts his ledger and refuses to record it. He says gold stairs are not a category recognized by decent bookkeeping. Still, the shares remain real whether or not the staircase does. 177,000. You copy the number again, and the digits line up like tidy little soldiers of absurdity. You cannot hold such a figure in your mind without seeing all its consequences. Whoever buys those shares does not merely receive paper. He receives leverage, votes, influence, and a hand on the tap of the busiest ditch on earth. That is why the French matter so much tonight. Their interest in the canal is not sentimental, however many speeches mention progress and civilization. It is practical, administrative, and very fond of chairs around tables. The French already dominate the company's governance. Their men know the offices, the procedures, the habits, and the little private corridors where real decisions drift after formal meetings end. They have the stationery. This alone can rule half the world. You picture thick cream paper with French headings. You picture maps marked in careful ink. You picture committee rooms where everyone knows which seat squeaks and which clerk forgets sugar. When people say the French wish to maintain their position, they make it sound abstract. It is not abstract at all. It means they wish to keep the keys, the minutes, the language of debate, and the habit of being obeyed. Control often looks very plain up close. It looks like who drafts the agenda. It looks like who signs the routine note. It looks like who decides whether a matter waits until Tuesday. That sort of power rarely stomps into a room wearing boots. It sits down, folds its gloves, and asks for another copy of the report. By the time anyone notices, the report already agrees with it. You can almost admire the neatness of it. Almost. But admiration is hard work, when 70% of the traffic is British and none of the ownership is. Mr. Pemberton produces another subledger from a drawer so narrow it ought to contain only pencils. Instead, it contains 14 years of irritation. He flips to a page of canal governance notes and smooths the corner flat. He has arranged the names into columns of nationality, voting rights, and board influence. He has even used different ink shades because indignation apparently comes in colors. The darker entries denote what he calls structural inconvenience. You read down the page with him. French influence spreads through committees, directorships, and habits of management. British reliance does not appear anywhere except in the traffic figures, where it sprawls rudely across the page. That is the imbalance in its natural pose. Britain sends the ships, France mines the mechanism. Egypt, through the Khedive, holds the huge undecided block that can tilt the whole arrangement. For years, this has sat in the background like a crooked picture frame. People notice it, then go on with supper. Now the frame seems ready to drop from the wall. A junior clerk enters with Evening Post and damp hems. He lays the envelopes out in order and warms his hands briefly at the grate. One envelope bears a Paris mark, which makes Mr. Pemberton breathe through his nose. Paris tonight is not just a city. It is a rival waiting across the table with very polished boots. Every message from there seems to rustle a little more than usual. You break a seal and glance over another summary of canal ownership. Again, the same arrangement stares back. French shareholders hold the dominant public stake. The Khedive holds the great personal mass. Britain holds only concern, which is not negotiable paper. Concern, sadly, cannot be entered as an asset. Mr. Pemberton has verified this repeatedly. He says if it could, Whitehall would be the richest house in Europe. The thought makes you smile into your tea. It has gone cooler now and tastes of tannin and metal. A skin forms on the top, which no one in banking has time to respect. Lady Charlotte asks whether the government plans to govern by indignation alone. Her tone suggests this method has not served households well, let alone empires. The teacup clicks once more, crisp as a small verdict. You imagine French financiers watching the same opportunity from the other side. They do not need to own every share. They only need to ensure that the canal remains French in outlook, French in procedure, and French when the useful doors close. It is one thing to collect tolls. It is another to guide policy. The first fills a cash box. The second shapes the road itself. That is why the Khedive's packet matters beyond its market price. Those 177,000 shares are not merely valuable. They are the difference between being a customer and helping choose the rules of the shop. You rub a spot of ink from your thumb with a rag that smells faintly of turpentine. The stain only spreads. Some evenings all the world's arrangements seem to do the same. At the front windows, the street lamps throw a weak amber band across the wet pavement. Coach wheels pass now and then. Hoofbeats dull themselves on the rain-dark stones. One of the porters returns from Threadneedle Street with a face that has gone carefully blank. A carefully blank face in a bank is almost never soothing. He hangs his cape and waits until Mr. Pemberton looks up. Then he says he has seen a French gentleman near the corner. The man is well dressed. He carries himself with that Paris neatness which suggests both excellent tailoring and inconvenient timing. You know the description before the porter finishes. The French courier has been shadowing this business across capitals for weeks. He has the irritating gift of arriving just after rooms cool and just before news goes stale. He has appeared at hotels your people have left that morning. He has boarded coaches an hour too late. He has missed conversations by a soup course, a train whistle, or one badly placed rain shower. Now he is near Threadneedle Street. That alone is enough to make everyone in New Court sit a fraction straighter. Rainwater drips from the porter's hem onto the tiles, and no one remarks upon it. Mr. Pemberton remarks on everything. Yet now he only reaches for another ledger. When alarm rises in him, stationery multiplies. He asks exactly where the courier stands. The porter says by a tobacconist first, then near a lamp, then across from a broker's window, where there is nothing worth viewing at this hour except one's own reflection. That sounds like waiting. It also sounds like pretending not to wait, which is a more tiring art. The city is full of men who loiter with intent and call it business. You move to the window and lift the curtain edge with 2 fingers. The glass is cold and slightly greasy from soot. Across the dark shine of the street, shapes pass under umbrellas like ink blots learning manners. You do not see him at once. Then you notice a stillness near the far pavement. One figure remains where others move. He wears a coat that fits too well to be English. His hat sits at a better angle than the weather deserves. Even from here, he seems to belong to a world where collars stay crisp under all known forms of pressure. He is not doing anything so rude as staring at the bank. He stands with the patience of a man reading the city itself. That somehow feels more pointed. The sight unsettles the room in a gentle, professional way. Nobody gasps. Nobody hurries. Pens continue scratching, only a touch harder than before. Mr. Pemberton squares the nearest pile of ledgers by tapping it against the desk. The taps come in exact little beats. This is how he processes danger, and also mild inconvenience, and also crooked paper. Lady Charlotte hears enough through the wall to ask whether Paris has sent another silk umbrella to collect what London has neglected. Her voice is dry enough to preserve documents. The courier remains outside for several minutes. A hansom passes between you and him, then a dray with canvas over crates. When the street clears again, he has shifted only a few steps. That little movement says more than a speech. It says he expects something. It says others expect something too. You lower the curtain and return to the desk. The room seems smaller now, though nothing has changed except knowledge. Coal smoke drifts from the grate, and catches in the throat. Papers on the canal suddenly feel less theoretical under your hand. Their edges are rough, their numbers are dry, yet they hold the shape of routes to India, freight prices, schedules, influence, and years of habit. This is the part people later forget. Great questions often sit first as very ordinary paper. They begin under lamplight beside biscuit crumbs and cooling tea. You think again of the 70%. The figure has a quiet swagger. It tells you Britain uses the canal as if born to it. You think again of zero ownership. That figure has no swagger at all. It has the flat face of a clerk presenting an empty receipt book after a full day's trade. Then there is the Khedive's block, 177,000 shares, 44% of the company, almost half the whole concern, balanced on a ruler's need for cash and a taste for splendor. Whether the splendor includes clocks, yachts, or the notorious staircase scarcely matters now, though Mr. Pemberton still refuses the staircase entry, which is his own small stand for civilization. Some lines, apparently, a ledger must not cross. The French, for their part, do not need imagination. They need only readiness. If they secure the Khedive's shares, their hold over the canal's governance hardens into habit. And habit is the strongest lock in Europe. You sit with that thought while the office clock marks another quarter hour. Its tick is steady and almost kind. It has none of the Khedive's rumored extravagance, and all the more dignity for it. The bank waits in its hush of wool coats, iron safes, wax strips, and disciplined concern. Outside, the French courier lingers somewhere in the wet London dark. Inside, the absurd facts arrange themselves in your mind and refuse to leave. By now they are simple enough for any tired soul to grasp. Britain sends most of the ships. France commands the company. Egypt holds the great loose bundle of shares. And everyone in the city suddenly finds the evening very interesting. It is the sort of interest that arrives after supper and pretends it is not an emergency. Rather like the government knocking on a friend's door to borrow the rent because the proper office has gone home. Victorian life remains wonderfully formal, right until it becomes not formal at all. You dip your pen once more and note the latest observation in a careful hand. The nib scratches. The ink settles. Somewhere beyond the curtain, the waiting city keeps breathing around the canal that is thousands of miles away and somehow present on every desk in the room. You sit at your high desk as the light goes thin over St. Swithin's Lane. The last of the afternoon clings to the window glass like weak tea. Coal smoke drifts in each time the outer door opens and closes. The bank sounds softer at this hour. Quill pens scratch like mice behind the wainscot. A candle near your elbow gives off beeswax and a little sigh of warm smoke. You sand a page, tap the edge clean, and blot a figure twice. You do not trust large numbers until they dry properly. Mr. Pemberton says wet ink breeds optimism. He stands 3 desks away and proves the point by frowning at a column. His cuffs are gray with old ink and fresh impatience. He straightens 2 inkwells that were already straight enough for ordinary Christians. The evening ought to settle into its usual shape. A porter ought to yawn. A clerk ought to ask whether the post has fully ended. Instead, a whisper moves down the room and changes the air. It begins with Egypt. It often does, though tonight Egypt arrives wrapped in unusual urgency. Someone says the Khedive needs money at once, which in banking terms means before supper has entirely cooled. You hear the word Suez and lift your head. Even the junior clerks stop pretending not to listen. The canal hangs over every map now like a fresh blue stitch. You know its route by heart because everyone in London knows it by heart. Steamers pass through that ditch instead of drifting around Africa for weeks. The canal is the Victorian internet backbone, and everyone knows who controls the cable controls the world. That thought lands in the room with a neat and heavy silence. You can almost hear distant ships shortening their voyages on your blotter. For once, even Mr. Pemberton forgets to grumble at the mention of overseas geography. Then the numbers begin to arrive in scraps. The Khedive of Egypt may sell all his shares at once, not a few, not a polite handful, all of them. You pause with your pen held over a ledger line. The nib gathers a dark bead while your mind tries the figure on. 177,000 shares is not a number that sits quietly. When someone adds that the bundle amounts to 44% of the canal company, you inhale through your nose. Beeswax, coal, damp wool from coats near the door, and beneath those ordinary smells, the sharp smell of money changing shape. A single transaction that size, feels almost rude. Markets prefer nibbling, governments prefer committees. A block that large is like seeing half a cathedral offered from the back of a cart. Mr. Pemberton opens one drawer and then another. From the second drawer he produces a subledger nobody recalls seeing before. He lays it down with the air of a man introducing a new illness. He asks who first says 44% and whether that person can be trusted. He asks whether the figure includes voting rights, fees, or any mysterious Egyptian decorations attached by custom. Then he writes the number down anyway and underlines it twice. You know enough already to feel the shape of the problem. A seller who needs immediate cash does not wait for a pleasing season. He sells in weather fair or foul, and he sells to whoever can count fastest. The Khedive's need, as it is first told, sounds simple. He has debts. Clerks prefer them that way because debts fit into columns. Then the explanation expands, as these things do. The debts are not only public and ceremonial, they are also personal, domestic, decorative, and somehow upholstered. By the next desk, the story includes a palace renovation. By the window, the renovation has tripled in cost, for reasons nobody can explain. Near the fire grate, a clerk lowers his voice and adds a room full of French clocks. You have never seen these clocks. You now feel you have seen far too many of them. Each retelling adds another mantelpiece and another bell with a painted shepherdess. Lady Charlotte sits in the adjoining drawing room with her tea and an opinion ready for every saucer. Through the half-open door, you hear the tiny, deliberate click of porcelain. It is the sound she makes when a man has behaved expensively. She says the Khedive appears to have mistaken a treasury for a dressing table. She says no one needs that many clocks unless he plans to quarrel with time itself. She says doing business after supper is bad enough without French clocks entering the discussion. A footman carries in fresh candles and nearly stumbles over the carpet lip. You smell hot tallow for a moment before the beeswax wins again. The flame makes the brass on the rails glow as if it has private information. More letters arrive. They do not say much. Urgent letters often contain mostly posture and bad penmanship, but the pieces join well enough to make a clear picture. The Khedive needs ready money, not promises. He cannot wait through deliberation, and certainly not through parliamentary moods. Interest grows while men clear their throats, and creditors do not pause for constitutional elegance. You have seen distressed sellers before, though not on this scale. They send word at odd hours. They ask for speed in tones that try to sound casual. They are like householders selling silver while insisting they always preferred pewter. The room grows warmer as the day closes. Your collar rubs slightly at the neck. Wax gathers in pale tears along a candlestick, while you copy a figure that still feels unreal. £4,000,000 begins to circulate at last. It does not enter the room as a number. It enters like a piece of furniture too large for the door. You write it once and stare at it. Then you write it again more neatly. The line of ink looks calm, almost modest, which is a poor joke on a sum that could buy small worlds. In 1875, £4,000,000 is not money so much as weather. It passes over the land and changes what grows. Even the ledgers seem to stiffen under the weight of it. Mr. Pemberton hears the amount and closes his eyes briefly. Then he opens a third drawer with a look of personal betrayal. Inside lies another subledger, which suggests he has long expected civilization to do this to him. He mutters that any transaction above £50,000 is an affront to order. At 4 million, he says, order may as well take the evening off. Then he aligns his ruler with the page as if discipline might yet return. You think of what £4,000,000 feels like in simpler things. It is coal for winters beyond counting. It is linen, bricks, tea, rent, wages, and horse feed for years. It is also tonight a deadline. By now the whispers have reached higher ears. The Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli hears that this great block may be had. You do not see him yet, but his style arrives before his boots. He has long liked bold strokes in far places. He enjoys an empire the way some men enjoy a dramatic waistcoat. If a map can be improved by one decisive line, he wants the pen. To him, the canal is not merely a ditch with tolls and paperwork. It is a route to India, made shorter and safer for commerce. It is time folded up and sold by the mile. You imagine him receiving the news and sitting a little straighter. The Khedive's distress becomes in that moment an imperial opportunity, the sort that appears once and then never again, like a train no one expected at that platform. There is a rustle near the outer room. Coats shift. A messenger is admitted quickly and with an effort at calm. Everyone becomes very interested in ordinary papers, while listening with complete devotion. The message confirms what rumor has already embroidered. The shares may be bought in one piece if money appears at once. Delay will invite rivals, hesitations, committees, and Frenchmen. The mention of Frenchmen stirs the room in a different way. Somewhere in Europe, elegant men with excellent gloves are certainly moving already. You picture the French courier polishing his accent and missing every coach by one useful hour. For days he has been shadowing the matter from capital to capital. He arrives after doors close and leaves after answers have gone stale. One almost feels for him, in the gentle way one feels for a cat watching rain. Inside New Court, however, pity remains theoretical. Speed matters more than sympathy. Your hand moves over the ledger, while your mind tries to keep pace with events. Disraeli, you now hear, does not intend to wait for Parliament. There is no time for the Commons to warm their benches and debate canal geography. By the time speeches finish, the shares could be in someone else's pocket. This choice feels both shocking and oddly tidy. He sees a rare chance and reaches for it at once. It is essentially the government turning up after dark to borrow rent money because the treasury is closed for the season. The comparison would make Lady Charlotte sniff, which she soon does. Her teacup lands with another deliberate click in the next room. She says ministers should not shop for empires, as if buying oysters after the market shuts. Yet even she sounds interested. You hear her ask for more hot water and less gossip. The second request is ignored with the smooth professionalism of a large household. The request that matters is simple in form and immense in result. The government needs a loan. It needs it now. It needs discretion, speed, and a house able to move millions before breakfast. That description fits very few addresses in London. New Court fits it with unnerving ease. The walls themselves seem to know how to keep secrets, while adding correctly. You smooth the cuff of your sleeve and sharpen a pen. Small actions become precious at moments like this. They let the body continue while the mind walks around astonishing facts. Someone brings in a tray with tea gone stewed and biscuits gone soft. You take one anyway, because history is easier on a settled stomach. It tastes faintly of nutmeg and paper. Across the room, Mr. Pemberton refuses refreshment on moral grounds. Then he accepts half a biscuit on clerical grounds. Crumbs appear on his ledger and offend him almost as much as the 4 million. The Khedive's reasons are explained again for a new arrival. This time the debts include gaming tables, the palace renovation, the French clocks, and a flotilla of private yachts. No one asks how many yachts count as a flotilla in Egypt. Lady Charlotte supplies the answer from the drawing room. She says 1 yacht is leisure, and 2 yachts are vanity. 3 yachts, she says, are an audit. A junior clerk repeats a rumor about a golden staircase. Mr. Pemberton looks up at once and forbids the staircase entry. He says the ledger is for finance, not fairy tales, and certainly not gilded staircases. You suspect the staircase will return before midnight, because stories enjoy upholstery. Each retelling makes the Khedive sound less like a debtor and more like a man furnishing an opera. The money, however, remains urgently real. What matters is not the color of his stair rails. What matters is that he must turn shares into cash at speed. The canal stock becomes, for one remarkable evening, a royal pawn ticket. You can feel the change in the room as this settles. Men stop asking whether the sale is likely. They begin asking whether the funds can be assembled. Banking grows most intense when it turns practical. Figures move from rumor into arrangement. Telegraphs are considered. Drafts are prepared. Names are checked against old relationships and older trust. The whole house hums without ever raising its voice. You take down an earlier volume and compare handwritings by lamplight. The leather is warm from nearby candles. Dust clings lightly to your fingertips and smells like old paper and dry wool. The amount still resists ordinary thought. 4 million pounds will not fit politely into imagination. It must be approached sideways through parts and papers and signatures. You think of it in sovereigns, briefly, and reject the idea at once. The pile would become absurd before it became useful. Banking exists partly so that no one must count like a dragon. Around you, the machinery of trust takes shape. Notes move from hand to hand with quiet efficiency. Doors open, shut, and open again. Every hinge seems to understand the need for discretion. Disraeli's decision now feels less reckless than swift. He is not seeking a broad national conversation. He is reaching for a narrow window that may close by morning. That is his gamble. He trusts that the country will prefer success to procedure once the deed is done. He also trusts that a route to India will make many complaints sound surprisingly academic. You have seen smaller versions of this in families and firms. Permission often arrives faster after the purchase than before it. A new carpet looks wiser once it covers the draft. Still, this is no carpet. This is nearly half the canal in a single purchase. The scale gives the room a strange, dreamlike steadiness. Outside, carriage wheels soften over the damp street. Inside, the candles shorten. Someone trims a wick and the room briefly smells like singed thread. You make another clean copy, because clean copies calm the nerves. The evening acquires layers. First there is the ordinary bank beneath everything, then there is the urgent negotiation above it. Above that, like a hat on a hat, rests the empire. It is almost funny how much of rule depends on desks. Maps change because men sit down carefully. The world turns on sanded paper and handwriting that remains legible after midnight. At some point you hear that the Khedive wants the money immediately and in full assurance. There will be no leisurely subscription, no public ceremony, no broad invitation to investors. One buyer must be ready. That makes the chance even larger. 44% offered in one parcel means influence bought in a single reach. Most fortunes grow by spoonfuls. This one arrives by bucket. No wonder Disraeli moves without waiting for Parliament to gather its shawls. Delay would turn an open door into a crowded hall. Rivals would step in with polished boots and continental certainty. The French courier, you feel sure, is somewhere between stations at this very moment. He is probably holding an impeccable letter of introduction and cursing English weather under his breath. It is hard to compete with damp urgency in an open bank. You dip your pen again and feel the pleasant drag of nib on paper. Ink smells metallic and earthy at once. It gives a kind of comfort because it obeys the hand. In the drawing room, Lady Charlotte asks whether the Prime Minister has considered the impropriety of borrowing millions on a verbal assurance. She answers herself before anyone else can. She says men always find formality optional when glory looks punctual. There is truth in that, though tonight even caution dresses briskly. Lionel de Rothschild is prepared to back the loan on extraordinary speed. It is the most Victorian crowdfunding event imaginable, if Kickstarter wore a top hat and funded the empire. No one in Newcourt would phrase it that way, of course. They would speak of credit, confidence, and necessity. But the shape remains the same. One powerful friend passes the hat for a nation at exactly the right hour. You sense that everyone understands the risk while refusing to dramatize it. That is the house style. The larger the transaction, the quieter the room becomes. Mr. Pemberton proves this by lowering his voice to a mournful whisper. He asks for 3 copies of one memorandum and 2 of another. Then he produces yet another sub-ledger as if drawing a rabbit from very disapproving sleeves. You begin to see how the impossible becomes practical. Not by thunder, not by trumpet, by one man fetching a file, another checking a date, and a third deciding not to waste 10 minutes. The Khedive's motives receive one final expansion before the hour grows truly late. Now the clocks are joined by marble baths, imported mirrors, and that forbidden golden staircase. Mr. Pemberton writes only debts and underlines the word until it behaves. That is enough, really. All the silk on the story does not matter. The plain core is immediate need. He has something precious and liquid buyers are rare at short notice. The canal shares shine because they connect continents and schedules. Steamers, mails, tea, cotton, officers, tourists, and letters all move faster through that cut. Control, even in part, means influence over an age that hates delay. You know this in the practical way clerks know things. Fewer days at sea mean cheaper freight and quicker news. Quicker news means quicker trade. Quicker trade means more ledgers, which is civilization in its least poetic form. So the opportunity feels vast, without needing any drum roll. 44% offered together means no patient accumulation over years. It means a door open wide enough for one decisive step. Disraeli takes that step in his mind before many men have sat down. He does not wait for the treasury to rattle its keys. He goes where the money is, which tonight is here. The request comes into focus with almost homely directness. Can the bank provide £4 million at once for the government to purchase the shares? Underneath all the grandeur, that is the entire question. You could phrase it even more plainly. Can a friend lend a very large sum until the proper paperwork catches up? It is comforting how even imperial matters can sound like household borrowing after dark. Comforting and faintly absurd. The British Empire, for one evening, behaves like a respectable cousin who has mislaid his wallet. New Court receives him without fuss and checks the arithmetic. The candles are low now. Wax has pooled in cloudy rims around the sticks. Your shoulders ache in a dull, familiar way. That means the work is serious and nearly well arranged. No one cheers. No one paces. The house simply continues in its restrained manner, which is perhaps the strangest part. £4 million is being discussed as if it were a coat needing mending before Sunday. You place one completed sheet atop another and square the edges with your thumb. Outside, the lane is darker and quieter than before. Inside, the hush has a reverent weight. It is the kind of hush that belongs only to places where trust has become an instrument. New Court smells of wax, coal, paper, and old money tonight. The empire has come knocking, and you are still writing it down. You stand at the long side table beneath the tall clock, and the minute hand seems more costly than usual. The room smells of coal smoke, sealing wax, and old leather warmed by the fire. Quill pens scratch in patient little bursts around you. Beeswax candles make soft yellow islands on the dark wood. You smooth a blue paper with 2 fingertips, and the paper rasps against the grain. The trouble on that sheet is plain enough. The government wants £4 million, and the government does not have its usual legal way to reach for it. You know the awkward part at once. The difficulty is not desire. The difficulty is machinery. In Britain, money does not leave the public purse because a minister feels bold after dinner. Money leaves because Parliament says yes in the proper form, after the proper vote, and on the proper paper. Even empire must queue at the counter. You have copied enough treasury language to hear its stiff tread in your sleep. Supply must be granted. Authority must be clear. The exchequer is not a household drawer with loose silver and an old button. You turn the sheet toward the candle and watch the ink shine wetly. A drop has thickened near one word and dried there like a tiny black bead. You think how often history depends on small, ugly blots. At the desk beside you, Mr. Pemberton clears his throat in the tone he reserves for sums above 50,000. He straightens one inkwell. Then he straightens the other, though the second one is innocent. You could describe the rule to a child with a biscuit tin. The biscuit tin belongs to the house. No one, not even the loudest uncle, spends from it without the family agreeing first. The real rule is older, stiffer, and wrapped in better paper. The Commons grants money, the Lords assent. The Crown cannot simply nod and open the nation's purse with a cheerful flourish. This is why the matter grows so odd in your hands. Mr. Disraeli may know exactly what he wants. He may even know by supper that he wants it very much. Wanting and law are still separate entries. You glance toward the window, where the black glass shows only candlelight and your own pale reflection. Somewhere beyond the pane, cabs rattle over wet stones. London keeps moving, as if £4 million are a trifle. Parliament is not sitting. That plain fact sits in the room like a damp overcoat. The House has risen months ago, on the 13th of August, when summer still made the city smell faintly of hot dust. It is not due back until the 8th of February. November lies squarely in the middle like a locked gate. You picture the green benches empty, and the papers stacked quiet in Westminster. Dust has time to settle. Ink has time to dry. Members have time to hunt, dine, travel, and speak at length elsewhere. Government still exists, of course. Clerks still copy. Ministers still confer. Wheels still turn. Yet one heavy wheel, the one that lawfully releases great sums, is standing still until the houses meet again. That is the gap beneath your shoes this evening. The empire is awake. Its purse is technically asleep. A footman brings another message on a silver tray, and the tray gives a faint cold ring on the desk. The note smells of rain and the outside air. Mr. Pemberton opens it with the care of a man unwrapping indigestion. You hear scraps as they pass between desks in lowered voices. The Khedive will not wait indefinitely. The French courier has been seen moving faster through each station, which is impressive for a man who always looks as if he has just paused for cuffs. Every time someone repeats why the Khedive needs money, the tale acquires one new ornament. First there are debts. Then there is a palace account that is somehow swollen. By the third retelling, a hallway of French clocks is ticking somewhere in Cairo. Mr. Pemberton refuses to let the clocks enter any ledger without itemized proof. You admire this stand, though it will not save the Constitution. In the adjoining drawing room, Lady Charlotte sets down her teacup with a small, deliberate click. You have begun to judge the evening by those clicks. This one says that borrowing after supper is unseemly, even for a prime minister. Her voice carries just enough through the door. She calls the whole affair audacious. Then she wonders whether the Khedive owns private yachts for each day of the week, which feels less like a question than an accusation against upholstery. You return to the blue paper and follow the chain again. No parliamentary vote means no authorized public spending of this scale. No authorized public spending means the ordinary channels remain closed, however urgent the matter feels in Whitehall. Urgent does not magically become lawful because it arrives in a handsome coat. This is a very Victorian problem. The state can feel grand, yet still be stopped by the absence of a properly initialed document. You know that some listeners in later centuries would expect a button somewhere. They would expect one person to press it and make the money appear. Instead, you have bundles of correspondence tied in tape, and men asking whether tape can be treated as authority. Another message arrives from Downing Street with a sharper hand and more cramped lines. Cabinet has discussed possibilities. Each possibility seems to have a door, and each door opens onto another clerk saying no. One minister asks whether an emergency can be met by existing balances. Another asks whether a form of advance might be contrived. A third appears to hope that the law has a loose floorboard, under which £4 million may be found. You know enough to see why this hope keeps failing. Public money in the Bank of England is not a jar on a mantle. It sits under rules, warrants, acts, and habits so well worn that no one steps outside them lightly. The bank is only a short distance away, and that makes the obstacle almost comic. You can picture the counters, the brass, the ledgers, and the men with exact cuffs. The money is near enough for a brisk walk and still legally unreachable. That is part of the strain tonight. The thing is close. The path is not. The Bank of England can hold the government's balances, receive revenue, and honor proper instructions. It cannot simply decide that a prime minister sounds convincing and release millions on patriotic atmosphere. Respectability has limits, and it usually writes them in triplicate. You imagine a bank clerk hearing the request and blinking twice over his spectacles. He would not shout. He would not faint. He would merely ask for the lawful authority, and then wait there forever until it arrived. There are treasury forms for ordinary business, and there are warrants for authorized issues, and there are routines polished by years. This request fits none of them. It is like asking a chapel organist to conduct railway traffic, because both involve keys. You take up a fresh sheet and note the legal block in your neatest hand. Your cuff catches a trace of grit from the desk. The candle nearest your elbow has begun to lean, and wax gathers at its base in creamy folds. Pemberton opens a drawer that most men assume is decorative. He removes a subledger bound in brown calf, lays it down, and consults it with an offended air. Then he opens a second drawer and produces another. You know the first auxiliary ledger well. You know the second by sight. The third appears on nights when telegraph charges become troublesome. The fourth, which now emerges from a drawer no one knew existed, produces a hush of respectful alarm. Its pages are thinner than onion skin and ruled in a cramped hand from years before your own. Mr. Pemberton sets it beside the others, as if introducing dangerous relatives. He straightens all 4 inkwells, though there are only 3 on the desk. The atmosphere thickens gently, like soup that has remembered the potatoes. No one raises a voice. That would be vulgar. Instead, everyone becomes very exact about sand shakers, sealing wafers, and the placement of penknives. Another note reports cabinet meeting and remitting, then meeting again in talk, if not in formal session. You picture ministers in dark coats around a table, each trying the lock with a different key. The lock remains the same lock. Could Parliament be called back at once? In theory, yes, with summonses, papers, travel arrangements, and all the great apparatus of reconvening the realm. In practice, it would be slow, public, and noisy, which are three ugly words when Paris is already sniffing around the canal. Even if recalled, members are scattered in country houses, seaside towns, and continental hotels. Servants would hunt for valises, trains would be missed, speeches would breed. The Khedive's patience would not kindly expand to suit railway timetables. You see this patience described on a slip of paper from Cairo. It has dates attached to it, which makes it more serious than outrage and more annoying than weather. The answer is wanted at once, and the transfer wants speed behind it. The French courier has also begun moving with that special energy seen only in rivals and men chasing closing shop doors. He is reported in Paris, then in Calais, then in London's direction. For once his tailoring may have to tolerate haste. Lady Charlotte's cup clicks again from the next room. She says that if the Khedive had purchased one fewer staircase of gold, Europe might now be sleeping. Mr. Pemberton, hearing this, mutters that he will not enter any staircase in column B without receipts. You cannot help smiling, though only inwardly. It is the sort of evening when jokes are folded and filed with everything else. What Cabinet wants is any lawful bridge between desire and parliamentary approval. It searches every shelf. Could the Treasury pledge payment later? Could some existing power stretch? Could a department carry the burden briefly and sort the wording afterward? Each route seems to end in the same drafty corridor. Without Parliament's vote, the government cannot properly spend public money for this purchase. No clever phrasing changes the bare boards of that fact. There are old habits of executive action in some matters, and there are emergencies of many kinds. Yet this is not about moving a battalion or posting a notice. It is about finding £4 million in lawful form before a seller loses patience. You rub your thumb along the edge of a ledger and feel the roughness of cut paper. Facts remain wonderfully physical here. A state problem becomes a stack of leaves, a ribbon, a blotter, and a clerk with sore fingers. A messenger mentions the bank again, as if repetition might soften stone. Could the bank advance against future authority? Could it regard the matter as temporary? Could it be persuaded by the national interest? The answer returns neat and cold. The bank is not Parliament in a different hat. It may be grand, but it is not licensed to improvise the Constitution. This is the governance gap in its full homely shape. The country can think, the ministry can wish, the bank can count. None of those acts on their own can turn wish into legal payment. You picture a cook with a fine joint, a bright fire, and no clean pan. Supper may be imaginable. Supper is not yet possible. The room grows warmer near the grate and cooler at your ankles. Someone replenishes the coal, and a sweet dusty heat drifts out. Fresh candles are trimmed, and the tiny snipped black curls collect in a saucer. A note from a cabinet hand reaches Newcourt with language careful enough to be nervous. The ministers are looking beyond public machinery now. They are looking toward private credit. That is the moment the whole business changes shape in your mind. If the state cannot lawfully reach its own purse tonight, perhaps it can reach a trusted friend's purse and ask very politely to be carried across until Parliament wakes. It is, when stripped of ceremony, the British government arriving after dark to borrow rent money because the Treasury is effectively closed for the season. The Empire remains dignified, even while doing this. That is perhaps the funniest part. You do not laugh aloud. The candles would disapprove. Private houses can lend where public offices cannot spend. A banker can act on confidence, on agreement, on risk measured in reputation and expectation. Later, Parliament may regularize what necessity has carried across the gap. The trick is to make this bridge stout enough for everyone to walk over without pretending it is a road. Words matter. Form matters. A promise tonight must become lawful settlement later, when the houses return and the papers can be dressed properly. You prepare fresh columns for dates, amounts, interest, transmission, and security. Your pen catches once on the paper's grain and then settles. On the desk, red tape lies in a loop like a sleeping worm. Mr. Pemberton consults the fourth auxiliary ledger and makes a face of deep personal injury. He had hoped, you suspect, to retire without ever using it. Instead, history has found the drawer and helped itself. His finger travels down an old page to precedents half-remembered and mostly disliked. There are entries for advances, guarantees, and awkward accommodations to government convenience. Each line seems to say that constitutional purity often arrives after the messenger. Another whisper from the front office brings Lionel de Rothschild's view into the room. Confidence can be extended. The matter can be arranged with speed. The assurance required is not collateral in the ordinary way, but the word of the government itself. You feel the odd lightness of the idea once spoken plainly. The legal obstacle remains exactly where it was. The route simply goes around it, through private credit and back into public purpose at the far side. It is almost a Victorian form of crowdfunding, if crowdfunding involved one immensely rich house, a prime minister, and considerably better waistcoats. The scale is absurd. The mechanics are strangely domestic. Still, private money crossing a temporary constitutional gap is not a casual thing. It asks for belief in repayment, in later parliamentary approval, and in the dignity of all parties surviving the morning papers. Belief is sometimes the most valuable item in the room. You hear chairs shift in the office beyond. Papers move faster now, though still without rush in the vulgar sense. A servant brings more hot water for tea and spills one bright drop on the tray. The drop trembles there like a bead of mercury. Lady Charlotte receives the latest version, with a silence longer than usual. Then comes the soft click of porcelain. She says, "Mr. Disraeli possesses a wonderful talent for treating impossibility as a scheduling difficulty." You suspect she means it as criticism and admiration in equal parts. That seems fair. The French courier, you hear, has finally reached London and is making his calls with elegant urgency. He is always one room behind events, which must be exhausting in such polished boots. Somewhere in the city, he is still carrying his letter of introduction, like a ticket to yesterday. At New Court, by contrast, the problem is no longer whether money exists. The problem is what shape of promise will bear its weight overnight. That is a better problem for a bank to have. You draft language that leaves no room for misunderstanding and also as little room as possible for embarrassment. A private advance will enable purchase. Parliamentary sanction will be sought in due course. No one writes, "We shall explain the rest in February." Yet February hovers behind every line. The Houses will sit again then, and the transaction must be set before them in proper constitutional clothes. Tonight is shirt sleeves. Later comes the full coat and respectable speech. You think again of the empty chamber at Westminster, and feel almost tender toward it. It is not hostile, it is merely absent. The Constitution is not failing, it is taking a seasonal nap at an inconvenient hour. This, too, is a kind of power. Rules matter enough that even urgent ministers must bend around them, rather than kick through. The empire may stride across maps, but at home it still pauses for forms. Mr. Pemberton sands a page and blows the grains away with priestly care. Then he adds one more reference to the fourth auxiliary ledger and underlines it twice. You suspect he will mention this evening to new clerks until the sun cools. The Khedive's reasons for selling return in yet another whispered version from the corridor. Debts remain the foundation. On top of them now sit clocks, yachts, a ballooning palace account, and one golden staircase, which is multiplied into two. Mr. Pemberton refuses both staircases entry. You are grateful for the silliness. It keeps the room human. Messages continue between New Court and the ministry with the steady pulse of a heart under blankets. There is no dramatic flourish to it. There are folded notes, sealed envelopes, carriage wheels outside, and men reading by candlelight until the words stop swimming. You take a moment to flex your cramped hand and look at the nails of your fingers, darkened faintly with ink. Your collar feels tighter than at dusk. The tea has gone tannic in the pot, but it is still warm enough to be useful. The legal mechanism once found looks almost obvious, which is the habit of good solutions. Public funds cannot move without Parliament. Therefore, private funds move first, with the expectation that Parliament later recognizes the act and settles it in regular form. So the governance gap is crossed by confidence, paperwork, and one very great banking house. That sounds grand. In practice, it involves pen nibs, sealed notes, a mantel clock, and Mr. Pemberton guarding his subledgers like a hen with troublesome eggs. You feel the whole evening settle into that shape. Not tidy exactly, serviceable. The Bank of England remains what it was at sunset, lawful and limited. Parliament remains where it was in August, absent until February. Disraeli's need remains immediate. Only the bridge has changed, and that changes everything. Near midnight, the coals sink and glow a softer red. Candle wax has formed little walls around the sticks. The room smells more strongly now of warm paper, sealing wax, and the faint iron scent of ink. You stack the completed sheets in careful order and tap them square on the desk. Their edges line up with a dry whisper. It is a small sound, but tonight it feels like a door closing properly. From the adjoining room comes one last measured click of Lady Charlotte's cup. She says doing business after supper is still improper. Then she adds that doing empire after supper appears, regrettably, to be inevitable. You tuck a blotter over the freshest page and rest your palm on it. Outside, London moves under fog and soot and damp November dark. Inside New Court, the Constitution has not been broken, only outflanked with exquisite politeness. Mr. Pemberton closes the fourth auxiliary ledger with the air of a man resealing a crypt. He slides it back into the hidden drawer and mutters that he hopes never to see it again. You know perfectly well he is already proud of it. The minute hand travels on. The law will wait for February. The canal will not. So tonight, by candlelight, private credit does what public machinery cannot yet do, and you sit beside the scratch of quills while the gap is quietly bridged. You sit at your high desk in New Court with your sleeves turned back a careful inch. The scratch of quill pens travels around the room like small dry insects. Coal smoke drifts in from the street. Beeswax candles sweeten the air in a way that almost forgives the smoke. Outside, St. Swithin's Lane has gone quiet in the November dark. The shops have shut their doors. The last carts have rolled away. The city keeps its evening silence with the solemn pride of a place that spends all day counting everyone else's money. New Court never looks eager from the street. Its entrance is narrow and discreet. Its brick seems content to be overlooked. A brass plate catches the gaslight without showing off, which is much the same style as the family itself. You know every turn of the place by heart. You know the front office with its polished rail. You know the inner room with the stronger lock. You know which floorboard near the records presses back with a mild complaint under your left heel. The candles leave round pools of light on the ledgers before you. Their pages smell of rag paper and old gum. The black ink shines wet for a moment, then settles. Fine dust from the day clings to the leather backs in a very democratic way. You dip your pen again, and hear Mr. Pemberton clear his throat. He stands at the long table with both cuffs already marked by ink. He has held his post for 30 years. He treats every transaction above £50,000 as a personal insult to his filing system. Tonight he is particularly offended by arithmetic. He has opened 3 ledgers for one matter. He has opened a 4th in case the first 3 prove morally unreliable. Every time he grows uneasy, he straightens his inkwells, as if discipline begins with glassware. From the drawing room beyond the wall comes the soft sound of china. Lady Charlotte is taking tea after supper, though she maintains that business after supper is an indecent modern habit. Her teacup returns to the saucer with a neat click. It is a sound of judgment more than refreshment. You never see her in this moment, but you can picture everything. You can picture the dark silk. You can picture the lamp near her elbow. You can picture the look that says the world has once again chosen melodrama over proper notice. The house and office meet each other strangely at New Court. Money is counted on one side of a wall. Family opinions are served on the other. The arrangement works well enough, though it gives every important event the faint feeling of being overheard by an ant. You sort a packet of foreign bills and keep your shoulders warm near the fire. One bill is folded twice. One bears a thumbprint in blue ink. One still smells faintly of sea damp, which is not uncommon when money has recently crossed the channel. A servant passes with a coal scuttle and keeps his steps quiet. The grate gives a soft sigh as fresh coal settles. The room brightens for a moment. Your shadow moves over the account books and makes the neat columns look almost lively. It is then that the knock comes. It is not loud. It is not frantic. It is simply firm enough to say that somebody has arrived who expects the door to open before questions begin. The sound travels down the entry and into the office like a dropped coin. Your pen pauses above the page. Mr. Pemberton nearly does drop his pen, which would have been a family event by his standards. From beyond 2 walls, Lady Charlotte sets down her teacup with a click that could cut sealing wax. No one says anything for one careful breath. Then the porter crosses the hall. His shoes answer the tiles in a low, measured way. You hear the outer latch lift, then the murmur of a voice kept lower than ordinary callers ever bother to keep it. The cold comes in with the visitor. It carries wet wool, horse sweat, and fog. The door closes again, but the air remembers London outside. You feel the change at your wrists, where your cuffs do not quite meet your gloves. The porter appears at the office door with a folded note on a tray. He wears the expression reserved for messages that arrive after respectable hours. Behind him stands the messenger in a dark coat, made darker by mist. Water shines on the brim of his hat and drops from it to the stone. The note is addressed to Lionel de Rothschild. The hand is official but hurried. The seal is pressed hard, as if urgency can be improved by extra thumb. Even before it is opened, the room begins to hold itself differently. Mr. Pemberton rises halfway from his stool and then sits again. He reaches for one ledger. He stops. He reaches for another ledger which seems to him emotionally safer. Then he opens a drawer and produces a sub-ledger nobody knew existed, because alarm always improves his furniture. You wipe your pen and set it beside the sand shaker. The messenger does not fidget. That alone makes him more alarming. Men with trivial errands often explain themselves at once, but men with serious errands tend to stand still and drip politely. The porter asks if the gentleman will wait. The messenger answers that he will. He says the Prime Minister requests an immediate conversation on a matter of national importance. He says it with the tired care of a man repeating words that were weighed before he carried them. From the drawing room comes Lady Charlotte's voice. She does not raise it. She simply places each word where it cannot be ignored. She asks whether the nation has misplaced something again, and whether it has chosen to seek it after supper. The messenger keeps his face perfectly arranged. You suspect he has heard stranger remarks in grander houses. Still, his eyes move once across the paneling and back to the tray. He has the look of a man who knows he stands at the wrong door for ordinary government business. That, of course, is exactly the point. If the matter were ordinary, it would have gone to the Treasury. It might have gone to the Bank of England. It would certainly have waited for office hours, which governments enjoy in principle, even when events do not. Instead, the government has come here. It has come to the discreet door in St. Swithin's Lane. It has come to the private bank that can move money across Europe before most men finish discussing the weather. It has come to the family whose letters travel as quickly as rumor and with much better handwriting. You know why, without being told outright. N.M. Rothschild and Sons sits in London, but it never feels limited to London. Paris answers it, Vienna answers it, Frankfurt and Naples have answered it before. The family network hums beneath Europe like wires not yet invented. If the Suez Canal is the Victorian internet backbone, then this house knows where every cable lies. Everybody in finance understands that, in 1875. Even people who dislike the family understand it while disliking it. Whoever can reach India fastest, borrow fastest, and settle fastest holds a very firm end of the modern world. You have handled enough foreign paper to feel that truth in your fingertips. You have seen exchange rates shift with weather in Alexandria. You have seen shipping lists arrive beside bond prices. The canal is far away in miles, yet very near in ink. Someone must fetch Lionel. A junior clerk starts for the inner passage, but Mr. Pemberton lifts one stained finger and redirects the duty to you. He believes rank should carry inconvenience upward, whenever possible. You bow slightly and leave your stool. The corridor feels cooler than the office. Gas jets burn behind glass shades and leave small half-moons on the polished wood. A runner softens your steps. Somewhere deeper in the house, a clock ticks with patient confidence, as if nothing unusual can happen before 10. You pass the drawing-room door and catch a glimpse inside. Lady Charlotte sits upright in a plum-colored chair, with her knitting untouched beside her. The tea table holds lemon slices, a silver strainer, and a plate with one plain biscuit remaining, which looks nervous. She sees your face and lifts her brows. You tell her only that a government messenger has come for Lionel. Her mouth forms the smallest line of amusement, then her teacup meets the saucer again with a click, so precise it could have signed a treaty. She says ministers always remember friendship when budgets fail. Then she asks if this is about the Khedive again. She says his explanations have already cost Europe several evenings. She adds that no decent household needs so many French clocks, let alone a golden staircase. You promise nothing and continue on. The golden staircase has become one of the office jokes by accident. Every time someone explains why the Khedive of Egypt needs money, the list grows stranger. Mr. Pemberton refuses to enter the staircase in any ledger, on the grounds that stairs are not securities. Lionel receives you in a smaller room, lined with books and dispatch boxes. He stands beside the fire, with one hand behind his back. His coat is dark and simple. His white tie sits without fuss. He has the calm air of a man who saves urgency for other people. You offer the note on a salver and watch his eyes read. He does not hurry. He does not widen his eyes. He breaks the seal neatly, reads twice, and folds the paper into a shape no larger than necessary, which is somehow more impressive than any dramatic reaction. He asks whether the messenger waits below. You say that he does. Lionel nods once and tells you to bring him to the library in 5 minutes. Then he asks, in the same tone, whether the Paris post has been sorted. That is very like him. Lionel de Rothschild has the useful gift of making one matter important without making all other matters collapse from shame. He can consider a railway account, a family dinner, and a prime minister's request without seeming unfair to any of them. You have watched him for years and know his habits. He dislikes wasted words. He remembers numbers after hearing them once. He keeps his desk clear except for what he is using, which feels less like tidiness than command. He is not theatrical. Men come to him with excited faces and leave speaking more quietly. He seldom needs to repeat himself. His authority works by lowering the temperature of a room rather than raising it. That quality has made him valuable far beyond New Court. It has also made him a trusted friend of Benjamin Disraeli. Their connection is old and settled now. It rests on long acquaintance, shared dinners, careful favors, and that deep political glue known as remembering who was civil when others were not. You have seen the Prime Minister's hand on notes before. Disraeli writes with style, even when he should probably write with speed. His messages tend to imply silk waistcoats, even on plain paper. Tonight, however, the hand under the seal had no spare ribbon in it. Lionel hands back the folded note. He asks for the latest position on available funds in London and Paris. He asks whether the telegraph clerks can be reached at this hour. He asks for coffee for the messenger, which tells you almost as much as the note. When you return to the office, the room is no longer pretending to be ordinary. Mr. Pemberton is standing now. He has arranged the ledgers into categories of possible disaster. One pile is marked by red slips, one by blue, one by no visible system at all, which means he is truly upset. You tell him Lionel will receive the messenger. Mr. Pemberton breathes in through his nose with a sound of administrative pain. Then he asks which volumes may be required. You answer that you do not yet know. He says that uncertainty is the worst possible filing instruction. He follows you into the library carrying 2 books against his chest. Then he returns for 3 more. Then he reappears with a narrow subledger from some hidden drawer in his domain. Its spine is unlabeled, which feels to him daring enough for espionage. The messenger enters after removing his gloves in the hall. His hands are reddened by the cold. One cuff is frayed. He bows to Lionel and delivers his message in a level voice. The Prime Minister requests a private audience at once regarding the purchase of certain shares. There it is at last. Not the whole truth, of course, but enough of its outline. You feel the word shares settle into the room. It carries Alexandria, Paris, Whitehall, steamships, and a great deal of salt water in a very compact package. Lionel asks only 2 questions at first. He asks whether the matter concerns the Khedive's holding in the Suez Canal Company. He asks whether time is short. The messenger answers yes to both, and seems grateful to have skipped 3 levels of explanation. Mr. Pemberton mutters that time is always short when a ruler buys too many clocks. He says this under his breath, but not under it enough. The messenger pretends not to hear. Lady Charlotte, who has somehow reached the doorway without visible effort, says that French clocks are never innocent. No one invites her in, but no one sends her away. She remains near the threshold, like a very elegant footnote. Her shawl is draped with such order that you suspect it could survive a gale. She asks whether the Khedive has sold the staircase separately, or insists on including it with the canal. The messenger looks bewildered. You almost pity him. He has arrived expecting urgency and perhaps secrecy. Instead, he finds the most powerful private bank in the world behaving like a family supper where everyone knows the figures and still wants the gossip. Lionel saves the moment by asking for the Prime Minister's location. The answer is Downing Street. The matter cannot wait until morning because other buyers may move before breakfast, which is a very impolite schedule but common in history. That answer explains much. If foreign buyers are circling, the window is narrow. If the Khedive wants cash quickly, delay becomes expensive. If Whitehall has not arranged authority in advance, then the government is essentially arriving at a friend's house after dark to borrow rent money, because the treasury is closed for the season. Lady Charlotte says that government should keep a better purse. She says this while accepting a fresh cup of tea from a servant, who appears at precisely the right moment. The spoon turns once against the porcelain. Even her stirring sounds like measured disapproval. You stand by the side table and begin taking notes. The table holds sealing wax, a silver bell, and a tray of correspondence knives. One knife has an ivory handle, worn smooth at the end. You place the messenger's details in a neat hand, though your fingers are still cold. As the facts gather, the shape becomes plain enough. The Khedive of Egypt holds a large block of Suez Canal shares. He needs money with comic urgency. He is willing to sell fast. Britain wants the shares before a French house secures them, or before the chance evaporates into committee. The canal itself sits far away under warmer skies, yet everyone in London feels its pull. It shortens the road to India. It draws trade through a narrow cut of water with the steady greed of efficiency. Steam, mail, cargo, and empire all prefer the shorter route. That is why the government has come here and not elsewhere. The Rothschilds can produce money at speed. They can speak to Paris tonight. They can settle across borders with the smooth confidence of people who have spent decades making distance feel like a bookkeeping inconvenience. The Bank of England is powerful, but it is also public and formal. Public and formal are useful qualities in daylight. They are less useful when you need secrecy, speed, and a reply before a rival house sends its own carriage. Tonight, the state needs a bank that behaves like a private nerve. New Court has long been exactly that. You know the evidence in small daily forms. You know the sealed packets arriving from the continent before luncheon. You know the coded wires. You know the house messengers who wear out boots faster than soldiers and complain more politely. Lionel asks for figures and receives them without visible strain. London can provide a large sum quickly. Paris can assist if needed. Gold movements can be arranged. Temporary advances can be covered. The amount required is vast enough to make ordinary men faint, and bankers reach for cleaner paper. Mr. Pemberton does neither. He simply opens another subledger and writes a heading with offended care. The very size of the number seems to insult his margins. He straightens an inkwell until it aligns with the grain of the table. Lady Charlotte asks what sum is contemplated. The messenger hesitates. Lionel answers for him. £4 million will likely be required at once. Lady Charlotte closes her eyes for one beat and says that the Khedive has clearly taken his clocks very seriously. Even you feel the size of it in your stomach. £4 million is not a sum one says casually over lamplight. Yet Lionel receives it as if discussing the proper cost of timber. He does not boast. He does not grandly reflect on history. He thinks about whether it can be done. That difference is why governments come to him, not because he is the loudest man in London, not because his office is the grandest in appearance. They come because he can say yes or no in the language money actually speaks, which is time, trust, and immediate settlement. Trust matters especially tonight. The government wants money before Parliament can chatter over it. It wants the purchase before rivals can assemble competing offers. It wants discretion so complete that by the time gossip wakes up, the deal is already dressed and at breakfast. Lionel has built his name on that kind of quiet. He does not leak. He does not preen. He has spent years handling matters for princes, merchants, railways, and ministries, and he has learned that silence is often the most expensive service on the bill. You remember other evenings when his discretion filled whole rooms. A duke might pace, a minister might whisper, a merchant might mop his brow into ruin. Lionel would sit, ask two precise questions, and make panic feel faintly embarrassing. Now he asks for his carriage. The servant goes at once. Another servant brings his overcoat, warmed slightly near the fire so the cloth does not bite with cold. Such small comforts are the true machinery of large events. You fetch writing trays and fresh paper. The paper is thick and faintly creamy under the lamp. The wafers sit in a little box beside red wax sticks. You lay out pens and blotters as if preparing for an exam nobody had expected before bed. Mr. Pemberton asks whether the transaction belongs under foreign holdings, government advance, special account, or moral irregularities. You suggest the first two. He says the fourth remains open in principle. Then he writes the date with a pressure that nearly engraves the page. In the pause before departure, the room settles into practical motion. A clerk is sent for telegraph contact. Another is told to remain available through the night. Coffee is brought on a tray with sugar lumps, thin cups, and a spoon that rattles only once. The messenger accepts his cup at last. Steam touches his face. His shoulders lower by half an inch. Even urgent state business cannot resist the quiet force of hot coffee in a London winter, which may be the most stable institution in the building. Lady Charlotte declines coffee and keeps her tea. She says tea is for thought and coffee is for mistakes. Then she asks whether Mr. Disraeli intends to buy a canal before breakfast with borrowed money and personal charm. Nobody says yes, but nobody says no. The description is close enough. This whole enterprise already feels like the most Victorian crowdfunding event in history. A prime minister has a grand idea. He lacks approved funds. He goes to a friend with a famous address and asks whether £4 million might be found by bedtime. If it sounds improvised, that is because history often is. The polished version arrives later in books. The actual version tends to include damp hats, hurried notes, cooling tea, and an overworked head clerk who deeply resents the size of the columns. A second note arrives from the outer hall. This one confirms that the Prime Minister waits and expects Lionel without delay. The wax is smeared slightly in transit. The messenger's horse, you hear, has blown hard enough to steam in the lane. While coats are fetched, you glance through the sidelight near the entrance. Gas lamps make pale circles in the fog. A carriage waits with the patient misery of hired horses in cold weather. On the far side of the lane, a sleek figure steps from another cab, looks toward New Court, then back at a letter in gloved hands. It is not your messenger. The man wears Paris tailoring and a face arranged for confidence. He pauses 1 minute too long, as if checking an address he has nearly caught. Then the cabman says something. The man climbs back in and rolls away. Somewhere in London, a French representative is searching for the same opportunity, with excellent boots and slightly imperfect timing. He will probably arrive tomorrow with his letter of introduction still crisp, and that will be no comfort at all. Back inside, the front hall glows under the gas brackets. The floor tiles have just been wiped where the messenger dripped. Wet wool hangs in the air beside beeswax and coal. A tray on the side table holds visiting cards, one umbrella, and an orange left from earlier. Lionel comes down the stair without haste. His gloves are buttoned. His coat falls cleanly. He pauses only to ask you for a concise memorandum of figures and terms as presently understood. You hand him the sheet and watch him scan it once. He thanks you by name. It is a small courtesy, but he does it without fail. In a house built on money, he spends attention very carefully, which is why even tired clerks remember it years later. Then Lady Charlotte speaks from the drawing-room doorway. She tells Lionel that Mr. Disraeli's audacity remains exhausting and impressive in equal measure. She says if the Empire insists on shopping at night, it should at least bring exact change. Lionel smiles, which is rare enough to warm the hall. He says he fears the Empire has brought charm instead of change. Lady Charlotte answers that charm is never legal tender, though men keep trying. Her teacup clicks down once more, like a little domestic gavel. The messenger steps forward and bows again. The carriage door is opened. Cold air slides in around everyone's ankles. For one quiet second, you all stand in a pool of gaslight at the private door of the most discreet bank in London, while the business of the age waits on a wet street. You feel the strangeness of it then, not at the Bank of England, not in some public office with columns and clerks enough for ceremony. Here, at New Court after dark, between the ledgers and the tea things, the government has come knocking. Lionel steps into the carriage. The messenger follows. The door shuts with a thick upholstered sound that belongs to good money. The horses start, hooves softened by the damp, and the lamps slide away into the fog toward Downing Street. You remain in the hall a moment longer. The cold lingers. The orange on the side table shines dully in the gaslight. Somewhere upstairs, a coal settles in the grate with a soft inward crack. Then Mr. Pemberton touches your sleeve. He says the matter now plainly requires Volume 7, 2 Paris schedules, and possibly the emergency register. He adds that if anyone mentions a golden staircase again, he will resign directly into the inkstand. You follow him back toward the office. The ledgers wait open under the candles. The pages are pale and ready. Outside, London keeps its November silence, while inside New Court, every pen prepares to earn its supper. You sit at the side table with the blue-backed ledger open under 2 beeswax candles. The page glows cream and gold. Your pen scratches in small, steady strokes. Coal smoke drifts in from the grate and settles softly into the wool of your sleeve. The room beside you is not grand in any dramatic way. It has a plain door. It has a rug worn thin near the threshold. It has the sort of handle that turns every day for ordinary business. Tonight that ordinary door keeps in very quiet voices. You dip your nib again. You blot the last figure with sand. You hear a footman pass with a tray, and the spoons give one brief silver chime. Mr. Pemberton stands at the tall cabinet, with his cuffs already freckled black. He has held this post for 30 years, and he treats every sum above £50,000 as a personal insult. You can see it in the way he straightens each inkwell. You can hear it in the way he opens drawers with grave restraint. From one drawer he produces a subledger you have never seen before. The new book is narrow and red. Its pages smell faintly of glue and dust. Mr. Pemberton lays it down as if preparing a bed for a difficult guest. The Prime Minister's envoy has arrived not long before. You have seen his coat in the hall. The hem is dark with wet from the street, and the November damp still clings to it. His hat sits on a side chair with a careful dignity. His gloves rest beside it, fingers folded inward like tired birds. A servant has brought him coffee, though he barely touches it. You do not see Lionel de Rothschild from where you sit. You know his voice well enough to place it through a wall. It comes low and even. It never hurries a number. It gives a sum the same calm attention it gives a date or a surname. The sum tonight lands with a weight you feel in your shoulders. £4 million is spoken on the other side of the door. Your pen pauses over the ledger for one breath. Then you set down the date again, because dates still need writing, even when empires decide to rearrange themselves nearby. The envoy explains the need for speed in a voice trained not to sound urgent. That voice is polite. It is polished. It has the odd flatness of a man trying to carry a burning coal on a silver tray. The Khedive of Egypt, you gather, is selling his canal shares at once. Each time this fact reaches your room, it arrives with a fresh little ribbon tied around it. First there are debts, then there is a palace account, then a startling quantity of French clocks appears in the story, as if time itself has become expensive. Mr. Pemberton mutters that clocks are not to be entered as a reason in any respectable ledger. The envoy says the opportunity will not wait for Parliament. The market may wake, Paris may hear, another bidder may put out a hand before breakfast, and then the whole matter changes shape. You write the word private in the margin of a note sheet. You write immediate beneath it. The letters look small and neat, which seems almost comic beside £4 million. History Offington handwriting that looks entirely suitable for ordering coal. The canal itself has the sort of importance that makes men lower their voices. You have heard it described in counting houses all week. It is the road to India made shorter by water and shovels. It is the Victorian world's backbone of cables and cargo, almost like owning the busiest wire in the world and pretending not to be pleased. Whoever helps move ships through that ditch also helps move the age. The terms begin to show themselves in scattered phrases. You catch them between the scratch of your pen and the hiss of the grate. The bank must advance it before proper public forms can catch up. Repayment will follow when Parliament sits and the Treasury can regularize what tonight remains a very elegant scramble. Interest is spoken of in a dry tone, as though it were simply weather. 5% is mentioned. The word commission follows after it. There is a brief pause that tells you everyone in the room knows speed costs more than patience, especially after supper. Lady Charlotte in the drawing room beyond sets down her teacup with a measured click. You can almost hear her eyebrow rise. She says it is exactly like governments to dine out well and then appear at a friend's house after dark to borrow rent money because the proper office is closed. A maid coughs into her napkin in what may be agreement. The envoy goes on. The shares must pass cleanly into British hands. Silence matters almost as much as money. No one wants a loose-lipped clerk in Paris to smell the bargain before the papers are secure. No one wants the price to jump while gentlemen are still reaching for seals and ribbon. You feel very useful by saying nothing at all. You sharpen a fresh quill with your small knife. The curls of feather collect near your left cuff. They look soft and harmless. They sit there while a sea route to India changes owners by lamplight in the next room. Mr. Pemberton asks for a second candle and 3 more sheets of foolscap. He also requests with wounded dignity a separate place for related memoranda. You would think the nation had chosen this evening solely to inconvenience his filing system. In fairness, it has. The envoy speaks of timing now, money by tomorrow, telegraphs tonight, banking houses alerted before dawn. You picture messages skimming over wires while the city sleeps under soot and fog. You picture clerks in other rooms rubbing cold hands together before unlatching safes. The whole thing feels like a household rising early for travel, only the trunk happens to contain £4 million. Then the room next door goes very quiet. It is the kind of quiet that arrives only when everyone stops arranging words and waits for one plain question. Even Mr. Pemberton stills. His hand remains on a drawer handle as if caught in prayer. You hear Lionel de Rothschild speak at last. What is your security? It comes through the door clearly enough for you to feel the sentence settle on your page. There is no ornament on it. It is the oldest banking question in the world, and tonight it sounds almost domestic, like asking where the spare key is kept. The answer follows with hardly any delay. The British government. For a moment the fire gives the only reply. A coal shifts inward. A small red seam opens and closes. Somewhere in the hall a servant walks by with the light tread people use around sick rooms and very rich men. You put your pen down because your fingers have stopped moving. There are answers that rustle with papers and answers that arrive under wax seals. This answer arrives dressed only in itself. It has no bundle attached. It has no collateral pinned behind it like a sample of cloth. Mr. Pemberton makes a soft sound through his nose. He does not approve of unsecured grandeur. He prefers parcels, stamps, signatures, and the comforting weight of things that can be tied with string. The British government, while substantial in a broad national sense, does not fit easily into his smaller red subledger. Still, you understand at once what the exchange reveals. Only a house like this can ask that question in such a moment. Only a government in haste can answer it so plainly. The state has ships and offices in Parliament, yet tonight it stands in St. Swithin's Lane asking a private bank to move first. Power often looks less theatrical up close than people imagine. It looks like dry voices behind a door. It looks like an elderly gentleman asking one exact question. It looks like a clerk in shirt sleeves waiting to see whether spoken credit will be enough to bridge an empire. The pause after that answer is short enough to miss if you sneeze. You do not sneeze. You count 3 heartbeats. You hear a chair ease back an inch on the carpet, and then settle again. Cigar smoke slips under the door in a faint blue line. It reaches you mixed with beeswax and the iron smell of wet umbrellas. The smoke drifts upward and thins near the ceiling. It gives the whole room the feeling of a thought being considered carefully. No one argues. No one haggles in the noisy style of lesser men buying lesser things. There is a little discussion of how repayment will be made good once Parliament has its formal say. There is the practical understanding that the shares themselves must be obtained without delay, and that the bank's advance bridges the awkward gap between need and procedure. In modern terms, you think, it is rather like a vast empire attempting a midnight subscription drive. Someone asks for millions. Someone promises that the public will make it right later. It is the most Victorian form of crowdfunding imaginable, except the prize tier is a canal and not a commemorative mug. Lady Charlotte's teacup clicks again from the next room. She says the real mystery is not the audacity of the request. The real mystery is how the Khedive finds new ways to spend money, faster than water finds a slope. Her voice suggests private yachts, mirrored halls, and perhaps a golden staircase, which Mr. Pemberton has already refused to enter anywhere official. The terms become firmer in the little fragments that reach you. £4 million to be advanced without public delay. Interest at 5% for the short interval. Repayment expected in a matter of months, when Parliament meets and the Treasury can replace this nighttime arrangement with daytime respectability. There is also the condition that the whole matter remain discreet until possession is sure. Speed means secrecy. Secrecy means fewer papers on tables and fewer names on envelopes. You have known large transactions built from mountains of documents, and this one is being built from almost none, which gives it an oddly barefoot feeling. You look around your room as if formal security might be hiding in the curtains. There is only the ledger. There is the sand shaker. There is a stick of red wax near the lamp and a paper knife with a bone handle. None of these objects appears ready to uphold the British state, yet all of them have been drafted into service. Mr. Pemberton finally crosses to your desk with the red subledger. He places it beside your open book and tells you with great solemnity to leave a generous gap. You ask how generous. He says he has learned never to underestimate the amount of explanation a government will eventually produce, after first claiming a matter is simple. You leave 2 full pages. From the next room, the envoy offers what sounds like assurance on behalf of the Prime Minister. It is not a legal instrument. It is not even particularly decorative. It is a gentleman's statement that the government will honor the advance, that Parliament will be asked to approve it, and that the credit of Britain stands behind the promise like a well-dressed uncle with very old silver. This, astonishingly, is enough to continue. You hear no rustle of a drafted contract. You hear no clerk summoned to engross a long bond in formal hand. The moment the deal begins to settle, it does so in spoken words, brief notes, and the shared understanding that some matters move first and catch up to their own paperwork later. You are a clerk, and this offends your training in the mildest possible way. You like margins ruled before entries appear. You like signatures where signatures belong. You like seals that can be held to the light and admired. Tonight you are asked to witness from one room over an immense agreement floating on credit, reputation, and a very steady voice. The deliberation remains almost absurdly quiet. A spoon touches a saucer. A coal sighs. Someone folds a single sheet in half and unfolds it again. The greatest private bank in the world considers the request in less noise than some households devote to choosing marmalade. Then Lionel speaks, and the matter tips into action. He agrees to provide the funds. He agrees quickly enough that the speed itself becomes part of the story. He does not wrap the answer in a speech. He gives it with the calm of a man deciding whether a carriage should be called. You start writing before the echo has left the door. Your pen moves across the page in a quicker hand than before. You note the amount. You note the expected rate. You note that repayment is to follow when Parliament can be convened, and the Treasury can breathe again. Mr. Pemberton peers over your shoulder with strained devotion. He adds a cross-reference to a prior government account. Then he adds another cross-reference to the cross-reference. By the third notation he appears calmer, which suggests his natural state is improved by branching paperwork. A servant brings fresh candles because the first pair are sinking low. The new candles smell sweet and clean. Warm wax softens at their bases and grips the brass sticks. You watch the light steady itself, as if the room approves of regular supplies during a regular history. There is talk now of telegrams and banking channels. The money will not travel in a wagon with iron bands, however pleasing that picture might be. Credit will move through trusted houses and wires. Entries will bloom in several cities before many breakfast tables have seen their toast. You make a note of names and timings as they are passed through. One branch, then another. A chain of confidence stretches outward into the night. It is all rather like pulling a curtain cord and discovering half of Europe rises with it. Lady Charlotte says from beyond the drawing-room screen that governments are the worst callers. They arrive late. They refuse to explain themselves in order. They expect the silver laid out. Then they ask for £4 million with the air of men requesting an extra blanket. Her verdict is firm, and the teacup clicks once more in support. You smile down at the ledger without letting the smile become a sound. A bank of this size runs on silence almost as much as money. Even amusement is best kept tidy. You let it settle into the corner of your mouth while your hand keeps forming numbers in brown ink. The envoy appears to ask whether any written undertaking is needed at once. There is another brief pause. It feels very different from panic. It feels like men deciding how much ceremony can be postponed without offending reality. The answer, as you understand it, is not much, and not now. The word of the government has been given. The word of the House has answered. Proper papers will follow. They will be drawn, approved, and stacked later with all the grave satisfaction clerks enjoy. But the heart of the bargain has already crossed the room without boots. That plainness tells you something else about Lionel's position. He does not demand a stage full of seals to prove his importance. He can lend because his house has capital, reach, and a reputation strong enough that governments come to him when their own machinery moves too slowly. The question about security is not mere habit. It is the whole map in one line. The government has urgency. The bank has means. The answer: the British government works because both sides know the world is listening, even when no one else is in the room. Your candle gutters once and recovers. You trim the wick with small scissors and brush away the blackened curl. Tiny things still need tending. It is soothing to do them while vast things arrange themselves nearby. Mr. Pemberton at last sits, though only on the front inch of his chair. He begins a list of supporting entries in a hand more forceful than elegant. Each line ends slightly uphill, as if his pen itself disapproves of urgency without proper folders. The room beside you grows busier, but not louder. A bell is rung softly. More notepaper appears. The servant carries in a tray with hot water, lemon slices, and a fresh cigar box, because even astonishing finance proceeds better when nobody has a dry throat. You hear the envoy thank Lionel in a tone that aims for control and misses by a very respectful inch. Relief has a sound. It is a coat sleeve easing against chair arms. It is a breath released through the nose. It is the quiet return of a man who had been speaking on a narrow plank over deep water. You write down the time as best you can. The exact minute will be argued about later by men who are not in your room. That is their hobby. Your own task is humbler and more durable. You preserve the shape of the evening in ink before memory begins polishing it. Outside, cabs pass along the wet street with muffled wheels. The city keeps on being itself. Somewhere a shop is closing its shutters. Somewhere a porter is sweeping a step. The empire's shortcut to India is being purchased above these ordinary sounds, which seems exactly how the world prefers to behave. The absence of a contract still sits with you like a missing button. You expect a great sheaf of paper to burst through the door at any moment and apologize for being late. None appears. There are notes, there are instructions, there are names to notify. There is, for now, no handsome formal document fit for framing. And yet the thing is settled. That is the marvel of old banking houses. Their strength is not only in vaults or in coin, it is in the long habit of being believed, which is a softer material than iron and often more useful after dark. Lady Charlotte offers her final judgment while accepting a fresh cup. She says a government that has already had its dinner should not ask for £4 million before bedtime. She says this with such settled authority that even the saucer seems to agree. Then she asks whether the Khedive might next sell his clocks one by one and spare everyone the trouble. Mr. Pemberton, without looking up, says clocks are movable property and easier to file. That is the nearest the room comes to laughter. The work continues. You sand a page. You shake off the grit into the tray. You fold a note for dispatch and warm the wax until it shines like a little red pond. The office smells richer now. There is candle wax, damp wool, cigar leaf, lemon peel, and the dark, reliable scent of old leather bindings. When you breathe in, the place feels both tired and awake. It is the smell of men deciding not to leave their desks yet. You think again of that plain question and its plain reply. What is your security? The British government. It is such a brief exchange for so large a movement. Parliaments, shares, ambition, and haste, into two neat parcels of speech. The deal has no need of trumpets to feel extraordinary. You feel it in the way servants walk faster without speaking. You feel it in the way even the floorboards seem to listen. You feel it in your own careful spine, held straight over numbers that will be repeated for generations by people who never smell the coal smoke. At last, a clerk from another room enters to carry out instructions. His boots leave tiny dark marks on the mat. His hair is flattened by fog. He takes the folded papers from you with both hands, as if they might otherwise wriggle free, and run to Paris. You think of the sleek French courier who has been haunting this business like a late umbrella. Perhaps he is at this very hour climbing out of a carriage with his letter of introduction still crisp in his pocket. Perhaps he is only 1 hour behind again, which seems to be his preferred distance from history. It is an uncomfortable niche, though likely excellent for hat preservation. You blot the last line and close the ledger partway. Not fully. Mr. Pemberton hates a ledger shut before the night is truly done. He says closed books invite omissions, and omissions breed cousins, and cousins breed scandal. So you leave the cover ajar by 2 inches. In the next room, chairs move back. The serious part is over, though the working part has only widened. Men who have agreed now become men who must send, confirm, and arrange. That, you have always found, is the true shape of great decisions. They are brief at the center. They are long at the edges. The world remembers the sentence, and clerks remember the paperwork that follows like laundry after a wedding. You flex your stiff fingers above the candle heat. The warmth reaches your knuckles slowly. Ink has crept into the side of your thumb. Tomorrow it will still be there, a small private mark from the evening. The British Empire knocked on New Court's door and asked, very politely, to borrow the future. For now, you dip the pen again. There is another entry to make. There is always another entry to make. And beyond the ordinary door, under the coal smoke and the beeswax, the night goes on agreeing with itself. The room grows quieter the moment the answer is yes. You do not hear triumph. You hear a chair shift on Turkey carpet. You hear a pen case open. You hear the old house at New Court take one calm breath and begin. The coal fire gives off a steady red glow beneath the grate. Beeswax candles soften the edges of every ledger. The air smells of smoke, sealing wax, wool coats, and paper that has spent years learning patience. You stand near the long desk with your cuffs turned back. Your fingers already carry a fine black shine from the ink. You know at once that no one is going home early. Mr. Pemberton receives the news like a man told that rain has started inside his filing cabinet. He straightens 3 inkwells with offended care. He opens one drawer, then another, then a third drawer that nobody remembers seeing before, though it has plainly served him for decades. The amount sits in your mind with a physical weight. £4 million does not sound like coins. It sounds like shelves bowing under ledgers. It sounds like every quill in London needing a fresh nib. From the adjoining drawing room, Lady Charlotte sets down her teacup with a precise little click. You cannot see her through the half-closed door. You can hear her well enough. She remarks that doing business after supper is a poor habit, though apparently Empire prefers bad manners when it is in a hurry. Someone repeats the reason for the sale in a lower voice. The Khedive needs money at once, a palace alteration, and a growing number of French clocks that seem to breed in corridors. Mr. Pemberton says he will not write down the clocks unless someone can number them. You move to the side table where the blank forms wait in neat stacks. The paper is thick and fatally rough. It rasps under your thumb like fine dry cloth. There is no magical button for a transfer of this size. There is no little brass lever marked £4 million. There is paper, trust, signatures, coded messages, and a network of houses that know one another as well as family silver nose candlelight. You begin with names and dates. You write the hour. You write the amount in figures and in words. You leave wide margins because wide margins calm everybody. The sum will not travel as one giant sack with a label tied to it. It will travel as promises arranged with care. It will move through bills of exchange, securities, balances already held, and credits that can be called upon before dawn loosens over London. A lesser bank might talk loudly at this point. New Court does not. You hear the scratch of quills from 3 desks at once. You hear sand shaken over wet ink. You hear the small, soft thud of seals pressed into warm wax, each one like a door closing gently. Baron Lionel speaks in a voice that scarcely rises above the papers. That is part of the odd comfort. £4 million enters the room, and still he sounds like a man asking for more tea. The first task is not gold, it is order. You note which holdings can be pledged at once. You note which balances can be drawn through friendly correspondence. You note which bills can be issued against the house itself, because the house is often the strongest thing in the room. A messenger arrives with damp hems and London fog on his coat. Another is sent out within minutes. Their boots leave dark marks on the stone floor near the passage, and a maid wipes each mark away before it dries. The Treasury cannot do this tonight. The government arrives after dark like a friend asking to borrow rent money, because its own purse is in another district. You keep that thought to yourself, because it is not respectful, but it is accurate enough to warm you. A coded telegram is drafted for Paris. Another goes toward Frankfurt. Another goes to Vienna. The words are spare and dry, because good banking messages do not waste time being pretty, and because too much detail tempts the telegraph clerk. You watch the message clerk count each word before it leaves the house. Every extra word costs money. Even at this hour, thrift remains awake. The real movement happens behind those short messages. A line on paper in London wakes a cousin in Paris. A cousin in Paris wakes a correspondent further on. Credit already trusted begins to flow into place like furniture shifted before guests arrive. You know the names of the firms as if they are streets in your own neighborhood. Some hold balances for the house. Some honor its bills without fuss. Some only need the Rothschild signature, and the amount becomes, for practical purposes, real before the ink dries. That is the trick, though it is hardly a trick at all. Nothing vanishes from thin air. Everything rests on accounts kept faithfully for years, on old obligations met on time, and on the dull miracle of everybody believing the paper because they always have reason to. The candles gutter once in a draft from the passage. You put a hand around the flame until it steadies. Your palm grows warm and the wax smell deepens. Mr. Pemberton brings you a subledger of alarming thickness. He sets it down with the expression of a man laying a sleeping child into a crowded cot. The label reads Continental Acceptances, and the corners have been repaired with pasted linen. You copy instructions into a hand that remains even, though your shoulders already ache. One line concerns short bills due in Paris. Another concerns securities that may be sold or pledged without causing a ripple anyone would call unseemly. A clerk at the far desk reads back figures under his breath. He does not say millions in a dramatic tone. He says them like house numbers, which is the proper spirit for surviving them. From the drawing room comes Lady Charlotte's voice again. She says the Khedive appears to have furnished his finances as he furnishes palaces, with too much guilt and not enough arithmetic. Her teacup clicks once more, which serves in place of a full memorandum. No one answers her directly. Everyone listens. You write out bills of exchange that will stand in for immediate payment. They are square, sensible, and a little stiff, like elderly uncles in good black coats. Each bill says, in effect, that a reliable house asks another reliable house to pay a sum at a set time. That sounds plain because it is plain. Yet whole empires depend on plain things written clearly and honored punctually. The seals matter. The signatures matter more. You watch Baron Lionel sign with a steady hand. The pen glides and lifts. That movement carries more weight tonight than chests of coin loaded onto 10 wagons and 16 panting horses. No one truly wants chests of coin, not for this sort of business. Coin is slow, heavy, and impolite. Coin must be counted, guarded, and physically moved, which makes it the banking version of insisting on paying rent with cabbages. Credit is faster and cleaner. It smells less of horse. The house begins to divide the great amount into pieces that can move through known channels. A portion can be raised against securities held here. A portion can be covered by bills accepted through Paris. A portion can be balanced against funds available through other houses that trust the family name, as they trust Sunrise. You make notes in red ink beside the larger entries. Red means attention, not panic. Mr. Pemberton insists on that distinction often enough to have made it part of your breathing. He also insists that every major entry must cross to another book, then to a third book, then, if the amount offends heaven itself, to a fourth book that appears from yet another drawer with a tiny brass pull. Tonight he reaches for the fourth drawer before anyone asks. The room never turns frantic. That is the most impressive part. Men come in and out with messages. Pens are sharpened with pocket knives. Cups of strong tea arrive on a tray that rattles gently. Yet the rhythm stays level, as if the house is doing exactly what it was built to do. You feel the bank's age in the worn edges of the desks. You feel it in the practiced silence between questions and answers. New Court has handled kings, railways, loans, harvests, and shortages, and it now handles this canal in the same grave voice. The canal itself hovers over the papers like a map you do not need to unfold. Everybody knows what it means. Ships pass through Suez, as messages pass through wire. Whoever guides that narrow route touches trade across half the globe. It is the Victorian internet backbone, except with more dredging and fewer gentlemen claiming they understand it. You smile to yourself and keep writing. Another telegram leaves for the continent, and another reply is awaited. The telegraph helps with speed, but not with magic. A wire can send instructions in minutes, yet value still settles through trusted paper and through balances already waiting in the right places. It is not just cousins at dinner tables. It is offices in several cities that keep books in harmony. know each signature by sight, and can act before formal letters finish crossing the channel. In Paris, the House can honor and arrange what London cannot physically place tonight. In Frankfurt, old channels remain useful because old channels are often the strongest. In Vienna, the name still opens doors that would stay politely shut to almost anyone else after midnight. You picture those distant offices as you write. You imagine candles lit in other counting rooms. You imagine another tired clerk flexing a cramped hand and blowing on ink while a watch chain glints near his waistcoat. A private empire of paper wakes quietly across Europe. It does not march, it initials. Someone asks what precisely the government offers in return tonight. The answer is nearly comical in its spareness. There is the word of the Prime Minister. There is the certainty that the government will regularize matters properly once Parliament wakes up and puts on its boots. That is all, and somehow it is enough. The real collateral lies in the family itself. For decades, the House has paid what it promised, when it promised, in city after city. That history sits under every fresh signature, like thick oak under a carpet. You have seen smaller firms boast of vaults and bullion. Newcourt boasts by never needing to boast. When a Rothschild bill appears, people generally accept it, because refusing would imply a misunderstanding of the modern world. It would be like doubting whether the post exists. One may dislike the rate, but one still expects the letter to arrive. This is the strange softness of power here. No raised voice compels anything. No soldier stamps a boot. There is only reputation, and reputation in banking is harder than iron when enough years have been layered carefully upon it. Mr. Pemberton murmurs that reputation also requires filing. He says this while aligning the ledger edges so exactly that they form one sharp line. You suspect he would file the moon if someone left it on the sideboard without a docket. The sideboard now holds a tray of sandwiches. The bread is going dry at the corners. The ham has curled slightly. No one notices until Lady Charlotte sends in a note declaring that famished men make bad arithmetic. That note produces immediate eating. You take half a sandwich with one ink-marked hand. Butter slicks your thumb. Mustard bites the air just enough to wake you for another page. By midnight, the first confirmations begin to return. Not all by wire. Some come by known couriers and office runners. Some come through banking houses in the city that hold themselves ready, because readiness is part of the service they sell to larger fish. The figures are checked against earlier estimates, then checked again, then entered in 3 books, because Mr. Pemberton trusts human nature about as far as he can staple it. He produces a fresh blotter from nowhere. You no longer ask. The mechanics are almost domestic when you sit close enough to them. A bill must be dated correctly. A signature must match the known hand. A seal must be clear enough to satisfy a sleepy clerk in another city who has his own worries about fraud and damp paper. Paper can fail in very small ways. A numeral can blur, a fold can split, a messenger can smudge the corner with rain, so you sand the wet lines, stack the sheets with tissue between them, and tie packets with narrow tape that leaves red marks on your fingers. Every detail helps the larger thing happen smoothly. Great sums, you learn again tonight, dislike untidy corners. Past 1 in the morning, the house settles into a deeper quiet. Street noises thin outside. The cabs pass less often. Somewhere in the lane, a horse stamps and jingles its harness, then decides the matter can wait until daylight. Inside, the ledgers keep growing. You write the accepted amount in one book with a fresh nib, because an old nib catches on the downstroke. You turn the page with care, so the red margin line remains unbroken. You note the corresponding instructions sent abroad, and leave space for the returning confirmation. That empty space has its own comfort. It means the system already knows where the answer will go. A junior clerk brings in more candles and nearly drips wax on the Vienna book. Mr. Pemberton's inhale contains 30 years of institutional pain. He says nothing harsh, yet the young man apologizes to the furniture as well as to the clerks. Lady Charlotte asks whether the Khedive also owns a golden staircase now. Someone in the outer office says he may, or perhaps 2. Pemberton says he refuses to enter any staircase in the ledger unless it produces income. You do not laugh loudly. You do not need to. A list of available securities is reviewed beside the fire. Some can be sold if needed. Some can be pledged as temporary strength behind the immediate advance. Some need not move at all. because the promise of the House is strong enough to bridge the short gap until the government's own formal papers arrive. That bridging is the true craft of the evening. Time itself is being financed. The government needs the shares now, before another buyer steps in. Parliament cannot convene itself into instant neatness. Treasury forms do not burst into bloom because a canal has become suddenly urgent. So the bank lends not just money but speed. It is the most Victorian crowdfunding event in history. If crowdfunding wore black broadcloth and expected repayment with proper interest. You copy the phrase government account in a careful column and feel how odd it remains. Usually the state is the mountain behind the paper. Tonight the mountain borrows a ladder from the bank next door. No one says that out loud. Still, the idea sits in every room. Another answer arrived from Paris. The terms are noted. The acceptance is plain. The amount can be supported through the House's continental reach because the name on the request requires no long biography. That is the advantage of being known everywhere in the useful way. Doors open before the knock finishes. You think of all the years that built this night. Loans arranged for rulers with difficult habits. Railways measured in both miles and signatures. Bonds sold to investors who trust the family because their fathers trusted the family and were not disappointed. No one can improvise that at 10 o'clock on a November evening. A network like this must already exist in the bones. So you keep your columns neat. The neatness is part of the inheritance. There is a peculiar comfort in the limits of your task. You are not asked to decide the fate of the canal. You are asked to make sure the 7 in this column is not mistaken for a 1. And that is a job with edges a tired mind can hold. You dip the pen and write another line. The sound is soft and steady. It is almost like rain on a window, if rain also carried legal force. Around 2 in the morning, Baron Lionel passes behind your desk. He glances once at the figures and nods. The nod is brief, but you feel it all the way into your spine. You are helping move £4 million through the night, and the room still smells mostly of wax and ink. A messenger is sent toward the Bank of England with related instructions for the morning. Another packet is prepared for a solicitor. A third is marked for immediate delivery, elsewhere in the city, where sleepy men will rise, grumble, light lamps, and then behave with remarkable speed once they see the signature. The whole machine depends on known habits. Who wakes quickly? Who checks figures twice? Who honors an acceptance without asking foolish vanity questions? Banking turns out to be built from human reliability stitched into paper forms. Even the envelopes matter. Thick cream paper for one, blue wrappers for another. Wax impressed hard enough to survive a pocket, but not so hard it cracks at the corners. You pause long enough to flex your hand. Ink has gathered in the creases of your fingers. There is a gray smear on your wrist, where you rubbed away tiredness and only redistributed the office. Mr. Pemberton notices and hands you a cloth without comment. The cloth is already stained from older nights, which is somehow comforting. By 3, the shape of the advance is clear. The money is not one pile waiting in a basement like treasure in a pantomime. It is a coordinated set of claims, supports, bills, balances, and promises that together equal immediate command of £4 million. Because the House is trusted, those pieces behave like one solid thing. That trust is worth more tonight than any lockbox. Gold can be counted, but credit can arrive first. And first, in matters like this, is almost the entire prize. You write down the final late editions with a hand that has become oddly serene. Tiredness removes vanity. It leaves only the work itself. From the drawing room comes one last click of porcelain. Lady Charlotte has apparently remained awake through sheer disapproval. She sends word that if the canal is bought before breakfast, someone should at least remember to order fresh muffins. This seems sensible. Empire or not, people need breakfast. The candles burn lower and develop small bright rims around the wicks. Melted wax pools and cools in creamy folds. The windows show only your own reflections and the red heart of the fire behind them. New Court feels cut off from ordinary time. The city outside sleeps, but this house keeps its own weather. Near dawn, the final confirmations needed for confidence are in hand. The amounts line up. The acceptances are in place. The papers required for the government's immediate purpose can be relied upon. No cheer rises. No hats fly into the air. Baron Lionel simply gives the next instruction, and the next page is turned. That, more than anything, tells you why the family holds such power. They do not need a show around the fact of being able to do what others cannot. You enter the settled figures in the master ledger. The page is cream under the candle, faintly blue where the light falls thin. Your quill scratches, pauses, scratches again, and then the line is complete. Mr. Pemberton leans over your shoulder to compare book against book. His breath smells gently of tea gone cold. He nods once and makes a note in a margin so tiny it seems meant for ants. Outside, a wheat-gray light begins to wash the lane. Coal smoke from early fires slips past the window frame. Somewhere nearby, a cart starts up with wooden groans and a horse that clearly did not choose public life. You feel the night in your back and wrists. You also feel the pleasant dullness that comes when a large task has found its proper boxes. The house relaxes by a degree. Coats are fetched. Used pens are set aside. The office boy opens the shutter a little, and daylight enters looking surprised to find anyone already halfway through a nation's emergency. Then the bell at the outer door rings. It is not a frantic ring. It is neat and measured. Mr. Pemberton gives it the look he reserves for avoidable paperwork and goes himself. A moment later, you see the visitor in the front office. He is immaculately dressed. His boots shine despite the London damp. His letter of introduction rests in one hand, with the confidence of a man expecting a useful morning. The French courier has arrived. He is exactly one night too late, which is almost elegant in its own way. One suspects he has been arriving a little too late all across Europe for weeks, like a very polished reminder that timing matters even more than tailoring. Mr. Pemberton accepts the letter as if it weighs 3 ounces and 100 futile intentions. The courier waits with handsome patience while the seal is broken. He glances around the office and takes in the candle stubs, the used sand, the open ledgers, and the faces of men who have already done the work. You can almost see the understanding reach him. Still, form must be observed. Form always gets a chair, even when the race is over. Mr. Pemberton reads the letter through, though nothing in it can change the morning. He straightens an inkwell. Then he informs the courier, with professional gentleness, that the matter has been concluded. The Frenchman receives the news with perfect manners. Only his pause gives him away. It lasts the length of one heartbeat and half of another. You almost feel sorry for him. He has crossed water and weather carrying the smooth confidence of possible advantage, only to find the transaction closed, docketed, cross-referenced, and sleeping peacefully in 3 separate ledgers. Mr. Pemberton, being Mr. Pemberton, adds that the relevant papers have been entered and can be produced if required. He sounds less like a conqueror than a librarian who has reached the end of a very trying shelf. The courier inclines his head. He folds his letter once more. Then he departs as neatly as he arrived, still elegant, still composed, and still holding the morning after like an umbrella nobody needed. When the door closes, no one laughs much. There is only a soft release in the room. You return to your desk for the final tidying. Blotters are stacked. Spare nibs go back into their box. The master ledger remains open a moment longer, so the last line can dry fully in the thin dawn light. The page before you looks ordinary. That is another quiet wonder. An event that shifts trade and policy across continents now sits in brown ink between ruled lines, as calm as any household account. You dust the page lightly with sand and tip the excess away. The house smells now of old candles and fresh morning coal. From somewhere upstairs comes the first clink of breakfast china. You imagine muffins appearing under silver covers, because Lady Charlotte tends to get her way when history has kept her up. You close the ledger with both hands. The leather gives a low, soft thump. £4 million has crossed the night by paper, by trust, by cousins awakened abroad, and by clerks who keep their margins straight. The canal will belong to its new masters soon enough. For the moment, what belongs to you is this small, satisfied silence at your desk. You linger first on the sound of the house itself. You hear the scratch of quill pens on ledger paper again. You smell the coal smoke in the curtains, and the beeswax in the candles. You stand once more in New Court on St. Swithin's Lane, with your cuffs faintly dusty, and your fingers a little stiff from writing. You feel the hushed reverence of the room return around you. You remember how strange it is that one of the largest turns in imperial history fits inside such ordinary things. You have desks, you have candles, you have sealed notes, you have men trying not to blot the page. You smile a little at the first great picture from the night. You see the Prime Minister arrive after dark with urgency in his pocket and no tidy budget behind him. You feel again how very British the whole request seems. It is the state appearing at a friend's door when the proper offices are shut, and asking to borrow rent money until morning. You watch the room receive this astonishing idea with almost insulting calm. You watch a loan of £4 million take shape among inkstands and folded papers. You remember that there is no glitter to it, you get no drum roll, you get no velvet curtain, you get a verbal assurance, a banker's nod, and a table that has seen many dinners, but not often the British Empire leaning on its elbow. You think then of Mr. Pemberton. You always think of Mr. Pemberton once the sums become too large for polite society. You see him produce one subledger after another, from drawers that seem to breed in secret. You see his ink-stained fingers flit over columns with the weary devotion of a man who believes paper, if kept in order, may yet save civilization from itself. Every figure above £50,000 offends him on a personal level. £4 million asks a great deal of his filing system. You can almost hear the offended breath he takes before opening another drawer nobody knows exists. You remember Lady Charlotte in the next room. You hear the deliberate click of her teacup each time the story grows more audacious. You feel her disapproval move through the wall like a very refined draft. Disraeli's nerve annoys her. The Khedive's spending habits annoy her more. Business after supper offends her on principle. You enjoy how she manages to sound unimpressed by history while still listening to every word of it. Some people watch empires. Some people judge them from a sofa with excellent tea. You also remember the great rolling excuse for the sale itself. Every attempt to explain the Khedive's need for cash grows another trim and tassel by candlelight. First come debts, then come palace costs, then come French clocks in improbable numbers. Then come private yachts that multiply with the ease of gossip. Then at last, someone mentions a golden staircase. You see Mr. Pemberton refuse to let that staircase into the ledger. He will accept liabilities. He will accept share transfers. He will not accept decorative architecture behaving like an accounting category. The whole explanation becomes so embroidered that it almost feels soothing. The past does enjoy overspending with theatrical commitment. You let another picture settle. You see the purchase move out of this night and into the next weeks. You watch Parliament ratify it with barely a syllable of serious opposition. You note how little uproar follows for something so large. You would think a purchase of this size might require thunder and banners. Instead, it receives something closer to a firm nod and a cleared throat. The public reaction stays oddly muted. That quiet tells you a good deal. The canal already feels too useful to argue with for long. Once the route is there, it begins to seem as natural as a road or a pipe or a post bag. The Suez Canal is the Victorian internet backbone. Whoever controls the cable controls the world. In 1875, absolutely everyone knows it, even if they discuss it in the tone used for weather and shipping rates. You pause on the letter that follows. You can almost hear the soft rustle of the page as Disraeli writes to the Queen with triumph tucked neatly between the lines. You have it, madam. The phrase lands with lovely economy. It sounds like the end of a shopping errand. It also redraws the route to India. That is the charm of statecraft when filtered through very tidy prose. A few words on a sheet can sound almost domestic, while they alter the map inside people's heads. You imagine the satisfaction of sending that line, and perhaps with that very human pleasure of being told something splendid is already done. You let the longer consequence drift before you in a slower line. You see ship after ship moving through the narrow cut of water. You see mailbags, tea chests, clerks' trunks, machine parts, officers' wives, folded uniforms, tins, rugs, letters, and all the plain freight of empire take the shorter path. You feel how Britain now holds 44% of the Suez Canal Company, bought with Rothschild money in a single evening, then wrapped in legal form a little later. You sense how that share becomes more than a share. It becomes habit. It becomes influence. It becomes the quiet expectation that this route sits under British hands. That feeling lasts for decades. It lasts in one form or another, until Suez in 1956 finally loosens the old certainty. Even then, the long shadow of this evening remains. A ship turns south and years begin to line up behind it. You do not forget the bank itself in all this. You know the family earns its commission. Banks do like payment, and this one is not a charity hiding under beeswax polish. Yet the deeper reward is harder to place in a column. You watch the Rothschild name settle more firmly into imperial history, not with fanfare, but with usefulness. That is the clever part. You do not need a statue when your paper passes through every important hand. You do not need a speech when your credit quietly makes the speech possible. New Court keeps its voice low, and the effect grows larger because of it. Then you return to the smallest image of all. You sit at your desk after midnight. You make the final ledger entry of an extraordinary shift. You watch the candle gutter lower and bend its flame. You feel the weight leave your hand as you set down the pen. You hear Mr. Pemberton restore the inkwells to order with grave devotion. You sense the whole house settling back into routine, as if the most consequential private financial transaction of the age were simply another late Tuesday. You are tired in that deep and honest way only paper can produce. Somewhere beyond the bank and beyond the smoke and damp of London, a ship on the Thames is already turning south. Now the night grows softer around you. The room, the paper, and the long route east all sink into a warm dark, and the hour rests over you like a coat finally lifted from your shoulders. You notice that Mr. Pemberton leaves the inkwells in strict order of height at last, and the world looks sortable again. May your dreams be free of panicking prime ministers, impossible overnight deadlines, and briefcases labeled HM government security. May your sleep be considerably calmer than Mr. Pemberton's ledger on the night Britain borrowed its own empire. May no one ever knock on your door after dark asking for £4 million and a receipt by morning. Thank you for listening. May your mind rest easy, and good night.